Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto formed the Fox Pirates and Hiyori Kozuki demanded to be his bride in Wano. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Fox and the Tattered Moon. The world was a symphony of violence. Wood screamed as it was torn from its moorings, the groans of the dying ship lost in the shriek of the wind and the deafening roar of water. Naruto Uzumaki braced himself against the helm, his boots sliding on the rain-slicked deck of the shinobi's will. The sea, a churning beast of impossible currents, was trying to swallow them whole. It's a waterfall, Naruto. We're climbing a bloody waterfall. Jin's voice was a bellow, barely audible over the chaos. The massive fishman, his blue skin glistening, had his hands clamped on the wheel, muscles in his forearms bulging like granite boulders as he fought a battle he was destined to lose. The currents are pulling us up. Naruto's gaze was fixed forward, his sage-enhanced senses a maelstrom of information. He could feel the colossal pressure of the water, the unnatural pull of gravity itself being defied. This wasn't a sea, it was a trap. A country that walled itself off with ascending rivers. It's an island fortress, Kurama, Naruto thought, his knuckles white where he gripped the railing. Kit, less sightseeing, more surviving, the voice of the nine-tailed fox echoed in his mind, a low rumble of ancient annoyance. The ship is breaking apart. I can feel the keel splintering. He was right. A sickening crack, like the snapping of a giant spine, echoed from below. The ship lurched, its upward momentum faltering. Ilara. Kage. Get to the lifeboat. Naruto yelled, his voice cutting through the gale with practiced command. From the navigator's cabin, a woman with silver hair tied back in a severe bun emerged, clutching a leather satchel to her chest as if it were her own heart. Ilara's face was pale, but her eyes were sharp, analytical even now. The log pose is shattered. The magnetic field is nonsensical here. We're blind. A shadow detached itself from the base of the mainmast. Kage, clad in black from head to toe, his face hidden behind a smooth, porcelain mask, gave a single, sharp nod. In each hand, he held a sleek, custom-made pistol that hummed with a low, contained energy. He moved with an eerie silence, a ghost on a dying ship. Another tremor, more violent this time, shook the shinobi's will. The mainmast swayed, its ropes snapping like threads. She's not going to make it to the top. Jin roared, abandoning the now useless wheel. Brace for impact. Naruto didn't wait. Everyone, off. Now. He channeled chakra to his feet, sprinted across the tilting deck, and grabbed Ilara by the arm. He practically threw her towards Kage, who caught her effortlessly. Go. The world tilted 90 degrees. The waterfall, which they had been impossibly climbing, became a sheer drop. The shinobi's will hung in the air for a single, breathtaking moment before gravity reasserted its dominion with a vengeance. Naruto shoved off the railing, twisting in midair. He saw Jin dive into the churning water below, a blue torpedo vanishing into the foam. Kage, with Ilara held tight, fired one of his pistols at the cliff face, a line of pure energy shooting out and anchoring them. Then the ship hit the water. It wasn't a splash, it was an explosion. A cataclysm of wood and waves. Naruto was caught in the undertow, a maelstrom that dragged him down into the crushing, lightless deep. The pressure was immense, the cold absolute. His lungs burned. Darkness swarmed at the edge of his vision. You're a fool, Kurama grumbled, but there was no heat in it. A surge of warm, potent chakra flooded Naruto's system, pushing back the cold, clearing his head. Find the surface. This country already feels like a grave. I have no intention of starting our visit at the bottom of it. With the fox's power reinforcing his own, Naruto kicked, driving himself upward. He broke the surface with a gasp, air and rain filling his lungs. The wreckage of his ship, their home, was scattered across the waves, splintered planks, a tattered sail, the broken figurehead of a nine-tailed fox. They were scattered. Alone. He scanned the shoreline, a dark, rocky coast shrouded in mist. There. He could feel 3 familiar signatures. Jean was already on the beach, a powerful, steady presence. Kage and Alara were further down the coast, their energies fainter but stable. They were alive. All of them. Relief washed over him, so potent it almost made him sink back beneath the waves. He swam, his strokes powerful and even, cutting through the choppy surf until his boots scraped against coarse black sand. He hauled himself onto the beach, collapsing onto his hands and knees, water streaming from his clothes and hair. The air tasted wrong. It was thick with salt and mist, but underneath, there was something else. A miasma of old, settled grief. It clung to the very air, a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic life of the grand line he'd grown accustomed to. He pushed himself to his feet, closing his eyes and drawing on the world around him. He sank into sage mode. The world bloomed. The roar of the sea became a structured rhythm. The whisper of the wind carried scents of pine and damp earth. But beneath it all, the land itself felt sick. He could sense the life energy of the trees, the animals, the very soil, and it was all faint, struggling, as if being slowly strangled. It was a feeling he recognized. It was the feeling of a land under a tyrant's heel, a place where hope had been systematically starved. And there, inland, a small, flickering cluster of life. A village. Its collective life force was a guttering candle in a storm, fragile and dim. And it was laced with the sharp, metallic tang of fear. "All right, Kurama," he muttered aloud, his voice raspy. "Let's see what's causing all this." He started walking, leaving the turbulent sea behind him. The trees here were twisted and strange, some looking more like skeletal hands reaching for a sky the color of slate. There was no birdsong. The silence was a sickness, broken only by the rasp of dry coughs and the hollow scrape of wooden bowls against empty pots as he drew closer to the village. The place was a collection of hovels, little more than shacks pieced together from scrap wood and mud. The people who turned to stare at him were thin, their skin stretched tight over their bones, their eyes large and haunted in sunken faces. A child, no older than 5, sat listlessly in a doorway, her gaze utterly empty. They weren't living, they were waiting to die. In the center of the village was a well, but the ground around it was stained with a sickly green-black sludge that reeked of poison. The river that flowed nearby was the same, its water sluggish and opaque. A man, who looked as if he might have been a leader once, took a hesitant step forward. His kimono was patched and faded. Who are you?" he asked, his voice a dry crackle. Before Naruto could answer, a different sound cut through the oppressive quiet. The thud of heavy footsteps and loud, brutish laughter. Fear, sharp and immediate, spiked through the village. The people scrambled back into their homes, shuttering flimsy doors, their movements born of long, painful practice. The man who had spoken to Naruto froze, his face a mask of pure terror. 3 figures stomped into the village clearing. They were large, unnaturally so, and their bodies were a bizarre fusion of man and beast. One had the tusks and bristly hide of a boar sprouting from his face and shoulders. Another had long, serrated mantis-like scythes where her hands should be, her head twitching with insectoid movements. The leader was a hulking man whose left arm was a massive, scaly crocodile's head, its jaws snapping idly. Gifters. Failed smile users. He'd heard of them. Low-level enforcers for the beast pirates. "Look what we have here, boss," the boarman grunted, gesturing with a club towards a small, pathetic pile of radishes and rice. "They were holding out on us." The crocodile-armed leader, his face a sneer, kicked the pile, scattering the meager food into the dirt. A woman cried out in anguish from a nearby shack. "You know the rules, scum," the crocodile man growled, his voice a low rumble. Everything belongs to the Shogun Orochi and Lord Kaido. You eat what we leave you. And we've left you nothing. The mantis woman giggled, a high, unnerving sound. They're getting bold. Maybe we need to make an example. The village headman fell to his knees. Please, sir. It was just a little, for the children. They are starving. The crocodile man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. He backhanded the old man, sending him sprawling into the mud. Starving is the point. Starving keeps you weak. It keeps you obedient. He planted a heavy boot on the man's back. Now, who's the stranger? 3 sets of cruel eyes landed on Naruto. He stood perfectly still, his bright orange and black jacket, though soaked and torn, a stark splash of color in this world of grays and browns. He hadn't moved, hadn't said a word, just watched. Assessed. Well, look at this, the boar man snorted. A fresh fish washed up on shore. Nice clothes. Maybe you got some berries on you, huh? Naruto's expression was unreadable. He looked from the gifter with his foot on the old man's back, to the scattered food, to the poisoned well. He felt the collective terror of the hidden villagers, a suffocating blanket of despair. And under it, a single, hot spark of rage began to glow within him. Get your foot off him, Naruto said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air with the sharp finality of a blade being drawn. The crocodile man blinked, then chuckled. Or what, pretty boy? You gonna cry? He's alone, boss. Let's just smash him and take his stuff, the mantis woman hissed, raising her scythe arms. Naruto sighed, a soft, almost weary sound. I don't like bullies. He raised a single hand, the fingers held in a familiar cross-shaped seal. And I really hate people who steal food from the hungry. Shadow Clone Jutsu. There was a series of soft pops, like a string of firecrackers, and suddenly the crocodile man was surrounded. 10, 20, 50 Narutos stood in a circle around the 3 gifters, each one with the same impassive look, the same coiled readiness. The gifters froze, their bravado evaporating in a flash of confusion and shock. What is this? Some kind of trick? The boar man stammered, brandishing his club nervously. Get him, the leader roared, regaining a sliver of his composure. It was a mistake. The clones moved as one. They didn't attack to kill, they attacked to dismantle. One clone tripped the boar man. Another snatched his club. 3 more piled on top of him, a flurry of orange and black that subdued him in seconds. The mantis woman shrieked, slashing wildly with her scythes, but the clones were a fluid tide. They flowed around her attacks, their movements perfectly coordinated. One clone grabbed her right arm, another her left, a third swept her legs. She went down in a clatter of chitin and outrage. The entire exchange took less than 5 seconds. The leader stood alone, his jaw hanging open. His crocodile arm snapped at the air uselessly. He stared at the original Naruto, who hadn't moved from his spot. This is your only warning, Naruto said, his voice dropping an octave, a low thrum of power resonating within it. Leave the village. Leave the food. And never come back. A flicker of defiance sparked in the leader's eyes. He was a headliner of the Beast Pirates. He wouldn't be humiliated by some trickster. You don't know who you're messing with. I'll kill you. I'll kill all of you. He charged, his crocodile arm lunging forward, its massive jaws gaping wide, aimed straight for Naruto's throat. Naruto didn't even flinch. He raised his right hand, and in his palm, chakra began to spin, coalescing with a high-pitched whir. It formed into a perfect, swirling sphere of pure, compressed power. A Rasengan. He met the charge head-on. He didn't slam the Rasengan into the man's chest. He didn't aim for a kill shot. With the pinpoint precision that came from thousands of hours of practice, he deftly sidestepped the snapping jaws and pressed the spinning sphere directly into the crocodile head on the man's arm. The impact was not an explosion. It was a focused, grinding detonation of force. The gifter's eyes went wide with shock and agony as the Rasengan tore through the scales and flesh of his Zoan-imbued limb. He was thrown backward, not by the force of a punch, but as if he'd been hit by a runaway train. He flew through the air, crashing through the flimsy wall of an empty shack and landing in a heap of splintered wood and broken pride, unconscious. The crocodile arm was a mangled, twisted ruin. Silence. The only sound was the wind whistling through the ruined hovel. The clones holding the other two gifters looked to the original. Naruto gave a short, sharp nod. The clones roughly hauled the other two pirates to their feet, dragged them over to their unconscious leader, and unceremoniously dumped all three of them outside the village perimeter. Then, with a series of silent pops, they vanished. Naruto stood alone in the clearing once more. The villagers slowly, hesitantly, began to emerge from their homes. They didn't look at him with relief. They looked at him with a new kind of terror. They had just watched one man, with what looked like magic, effortlessly dismantle the monsters that had tormented them for years. To them, he hadn't saved them. One monster had just replaced another. He understood that look. He'd seen it 1,000 times in his own childhood. He ignored their stares and walked to the pile of food scattered in the mud. He knelt, gathering the dirty radishes. Then he turned to the poisoned well. He closed his eyes, his sage-mode senses sinking deep into the earth, following the water source, feeling for the point of corruption. It was upstream. A blockage. Something deliberate. Without a word, he sprinted away, a blur of orange disappearing into the twisted woods. The villagers watched him go, huddled together in fearful confusion. A few minutes passed. Then, a low rumble echoed from the direction of the river, followed by a great surge of water. A child pointed, her voice a reedy gasp. Look! The river was flowing again. The thick, black sludge was being diluted, washed away by a current of clean, clear water. It swirled into the village well, flushing out the poison until the water that bubbled up was pure. Naruto returned, his hands and sleeves damp. He walked to the well, drew a bucket, and drank from it deeply. He then offered the bucket to the old headman. The old man stared at the water, then at Naruto's outstretched hand, and finally at his face. He saw no malice there. No cruelty. Only a calm, steady gaze. Hesitantly, he took the bucket. He drank, his eyes widening as the first clean, cool water he'd tasted in years soothed his parched throat. He began to cry, silent tears tracking paths through the grime on his face. Naruto turned away, unsealing a large scroll from his belt. He unrolled it on the ground, performed a quick series of hand signs, and pressed his palm to the kanji. Poof! A massive pile of food appeared. Fresh fish, sacks of rice, crates of apples and bread. Supplies for his crew. Enough to feed this village for a month. It's yours, he said to the stunned crowd. Eat. This was what broke them. The sight of so much food, given freely, without demand or threat. It was a concept so alien it shattered the grim reality they had known for 2 decades. The empty-eyed child from before toddled forward and picked up an apple, her movements hesitant, as if expecting it to be snatched away. When no one stopped her, she took a bite. Her eyes lit up with a spark of life Naruto had not seen since he arrived. One by one, the villagers moved forward, their fears slowly being overwritten by a desperate, dawning hope. They didn't see a monster anymore. They saw a miracle. A golden-haired spirit who had descended from the stormy heavens to answer a prayer they had long forgotten how to speak. It was in that moment of fragile, burgeoning hope that the procession arrived. It came from the direction of the main road, a river of color and sound in the muted landscape. Servants in fine silks, stoic guards in neat armor, and in the center, a palanquin carried by 4 strong men. At the head of the procession walked a small girl with a distinctive bob haircut and 2 attendants, and a giant man with a jovial face. The procession stopped at the edge of the village, its members looking with disdain at the squalor. The palanquin was lowered, and from it emerged a woman of such breathtaking beauty that she seemed to suck the very light from the air around her. She was an Oiran, a courtesan of the highest rank. Her kimono was a masterpiece of embroidered silks, layers of crimson and gold that depicted cranes in flight. Her face was painted a perfect, porcelain white, her lips a small, red bow. Her hair was an elaborate, lacquered sculpture, adorned with a forest of ornate combs and pins. She moved with a practiced, ethereal grace, each step a carefully constructed performance. This was Kamurasaki, the Dayu of Wano, the most desired woman in the country. She was a sun in a sky full of dead stars, and the villagers, even with a mountain of fresh food before them, fell to their knees in her presence. Her gaze swept over the hovels, the dirty people, the pile of food, and the 3 unconscious pirates dumped unceremoniously at the edge of the clearing. Her perfectly painted face betrayed nothing. Naruto, however, didn't see the performance. His sage mode was still active, and through it, he saw something else entirely. He looked past the silks and the paint, past the flawless mask of the courtesan. What he sensed was not a delicate flower. It was a fortress. A fortress built of 20 years of suffocating grief, of unimaginable loss, and of a burning, righteous anger that had been banked and hidden so deep it was almost undetectable. Beneath the layers of performance was a core of unbending, unbreakable iron. He sensed a will that could move mountains, a resolve that had weathered a 2-decade-long storm. He sensed a pain so profound it was a physical presence, an old, aching wound that had never been allowed to heal. Their eyes met. Her gaze, which had been sweeping over the scene with practiced indifference, snagged on him. She saw a strange man with sun-kissed hair and clothes from no land she knew, standing amidst a bounty of food, his posture relaxed but radiating a quiet, formidable power. For a fraction of a second, the mask flickered. In her eyes, he saw a flash of surprise, of assessment, and something else, a flicker of recognition. Not of his face, but of his spirit. In him, she saw a storm, an unpredictable force of nature that had just crashed upon the shores of her meticulously controlled world. It was a silent, loaded exchange that lasted no more than a beat. A princess in disguise and a warrior from another world, recognizing the weight of the burdens they both carried. Then the mask was back in place. Kamurasaki turned, her movements fluid and graceful, and continued her procession down the road toward the distant, false light of the flower capital, leaving the village and the strange golden fox behind. Naruto watched her go, the feeling of her immense, hidden sorrow lingering in the air. Who was that? Someone who has suffered as much as this land, Kurama noted, his voice uncharacteristically somber. Be wary, Naruto. A grief that deep can either forge a hero or a monster. It is rarely anything in between. It was then that Naruto's senses, still heightened, picked up something else. A subtle anomaly. In the sparse crowd that had gathered to watch the Oiran's procession, a lone figure stood out. A man dressed as a wandering ronin, his hand on the hilt of his katana, a straw hat pulled low over his eyes. He wasn't watching the Oiran. He was watching Naruto. Or rather, a strange device in his hand was. Naruto's clone, hidden invisibly in the branches of a gnarled tree, saw it clearly. It was a small, metallic object, and on its screen, a complex energy signature was being displayed, Naruto's own chakra waveform rendered in glowing green lines. Beside it, text scrolled rapidly, unclassified energy signature detected. Source, organic. Output level, 7, designation, anomaly. Uploading data. The Ronin's thumb hovered over a button. Before he could press it, a flicker of movement, too fast for a normal eye to track, appeared behind him. The hidden clone dropped from the tree without a sound. A single, precise chop to the back of the man's neck. The Ronin crumpled, unconscious before he hit the ground. The clone caught him, snatched the strange device, and dragged the man into the dense woods, propping him against a tree. Non-lethal. Efficient. The clone examined the device, its foreign technology humming in its hand. Then, with a soft poof, it dispelled. The memory, the information, the feel of the cold metal, all flooded into the original Naruto's mind. He blinked. Anomaly. He was being tracked. By whom? The technology was nothing like he'd ever seen. It wasn't from the elemental nations, and it didn't feel like anything from this world either. It was something else. Something advanced, and something that was specifically looking for people like him. Heavy, splashing footsteps approached from the beach. Naruto. There you are. Jean lumbered into the village clearing, his immense frame dwarfing the small shacks. He was followed by Elara, who was brushing sand from her dark trousers, and Kage, who moved as silently as a wisp of smoke at her side. We saw the surge in the river. Figured it had your name written all over it, Jean said, a wide grin splitting his face. His eyes took in the scene, the awestruck villagers, the mountain of food, the unconscious gifters. Heh. You've been busy. Elara's sharp eyes missed nothing. She noted the style of the hovels, the clothing of the people, and then, her gaze fell upon a tattered banner hanging from the headman's home. It was faded and torn, but the symbol was still visible, a circle with a cross inside it, and a bird-like figure in the top left quadrant. Naruto, she said, her voice quiet but firm. She pointed. That crest. I've seen it in the historical texts. The ones the world government tried to burn. That is the mark of the Kozuki clan. The rulers of Wano, before, she trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Naruto's eyes followed her finger to the tattered moon. The Kozuki clan. The woman from the procession, Komurasaki. The iron. Will he had sensed in her, the crushing grief. It clicked into place. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it was a grim one. He held up the device he'd taken from the scout. And we have another problem. Elara took it, her eyes widening as she saw the complex interface. What is this? The craftsmanship is beyond anything I know. This isn't marine technology. It's something else entirely. Naruto looked past the village, past the dark forest, toward the horizon where a false dawn glowed. The flower capital. The seat of the shogun Orochi and the lair of the emperor, Kaido. The source of the poison. The source of the starvation. The source of the sorrow he felt radiating from the very bones of this country. The source of the pain he had sensed in that woman. His path had been unclear when he'd washed ashore, a survivor adrift in a strange new sea. But now, it was crystallizing. The Kozuki crest, a tyrant shogun, a starving populace, and a mysterious, high-tech organization hunting him. It all pointed in one direction. He had a new mission. Find the heart of this country's sickness and cut it out. Jean, Kage, Elara, he said, his voice ringing with a newfound purpose that made his crew stand a little straighter. Change of plans. We're not just looking for a way off this island anymore. He turned his back on the sea and faced the broken land, a low fire burning in his blue eyes. We're taking it back. Chapter 2, The Gilded Cage and the Iron Demand. The flower capital was a lie, and it was the most beautiful lie Naruto had ever seen. After establishing a temporary hideout in a cave system nestled in the hills overlooking the city, they had begun their infiltration. The transition was jarring. One moment they were in the blighted, colorless landscape of outer Wano, the next they stepped into a pocket of impossible prosperity. Cherry blossoms, in a state of perpetual bloom, rained pink petals onto streets teeming with life. The air, thick with the scent of perfume and expensive street food, hummed with the sounds of laughter and shamisen music. People in vibrant, clean kimonos browsed shops overflowing with silks, ceramics, and treasures from distant, plundered lands. It was a city celebrating a festival that never ended, a gilded cage built from the stolen joy of an entire nation. This place is sick, Jean rumbled, his massive form disguised under a wide straw hat and a heavy coat that did little to hide his bulk. He, more than anyone, knew the look of decadent cruelty built on the backs of the suffering. It's a strategic deception, Elara corrected, her sharp eyes darting everywhere, cataloging architectural weak points, guard patrols, and the faces of Orochi's officials. She was disguised as a traveling merchant, her precious satchel of books and the Arbiter's device hidden in a large cart of cheap textiles. A concentration of resources. They've bled the other provinces dry to create this illusion of prosperity. It keeps the population here complacent and serves as a fortress for the elite. Kage, masked and silent as ever, simply stood on a nearby rooftop, a motionless gargoyle surveying the city's flow. His presence was a comfort, a silent promise of overwatch. Naruto, meanwhile, was everywhere at once. He had dispersed 100 shadow clones into the city, each one transformed into a different person, a delivery boy, a drunken samurai, a curious merchant, a flustered servant. They were his eyes and ears, a peerless intelligence network gathering 1,000 streams of information into a single, cohesive river in his mind. Patrol routes of the Mimiwaragumi are inconsistent, predictable loops, more for show than security, a clone servant reported mentally as he bowed to a passing official. Main weapons depot is beneath the shogun's palace. Guarded by at least 200 samurai, but the eastern wall has a sewage outlet that's poorly monitored, a clone rat thought, scurrying through a grate. Orochi himself rarely leaves the palace. Paranoid. Spends most of his time in the main banquet hall, surrounded by his Anawabanshu and courtesans. Another clone, disguised as an entertainer, observed from a distance. The information flowed in, painting a vivid, three-dimensional map of the capital's power structure. But it also painted a picture of its cruelty. A clone saw a wealthy merchant toss a half-eaten dango stick into the street, and a starving child dart out from an alley to snatch it from the filth, only to be kicked away by a passing samurai for being an eyesore. It was this casual, thoughtless cruelty that made Naruto's blood simmer. He was standing in a crowded market square, his own form disguised as a nondescript ronin, when he saw it happen. A young woman, carrying a heavy basket of laundry, stumbled, jostled by the crowd. A single splash of water from her bucket arced through the air and landed on the pristine hakama of a samurai. This wasn't just any samurai. His kimono bore the snarling black serpent crest of the Kurazumi clan, and his arrogant swagger marked him as one of Orochi's personal guard. The samurai stopped dead. The lively square fell silent around them, the air crackling with sudden tension. "Do you know who I am?" the samurai snarled, his voice dripping with venom. The woman fell to her knees, her face ashen with terror. "Forgive me, my lord. It was an accident. Please, I beg you." An accident? The samurai drew his katana, its polished steel catching the light. The crowd gasped and shrank back. Spilling water on an agent of the shogun is an act of disrespect. It is an act of rebellion. And rebellion, he said, raising the sword, is punished by death. The woman squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blow. The crowd watched, horrified but too terrified to intervene. This was their reality. Their lives were worth less than a dry kimono. The blade swung down. It never landed. Clang. The sound was sharp, metallic, and utterly final. The samurai's eyes widened in shock. His blade, a master-crafted weapon, had been stopped cold, caught between the thumb and forefinger of the strange ronin who had appeared from nowhere. Naruto hadn't moved with blinding speed. He had simply been there. One moment he was in the crowd, the next he stood between the executioner and the victim, holding the deadly blade as if it were a curious twig. His sage mode had told him the man's trajectory, his intent, the precise amount of force needed to halt the blow without effort. "That's enough," Naruto said, his voice calm. The samurai stared, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. He tried to pull his sword back, but it wouldn't budge. It was held in a grip of impossible strength. Who the hell are you?" Let go of my sword. Naruto ignored him. He looked down at the terrified woman. You can go, he said gently. She stared for a beat, then scrambled to her feet, grabbed her basket, and fled, melting into the crowd that was now watching with a mixture of terror and awe. The samurai, incensed by the humiliation, roared and put both hands on his sword hilt, trying to wrench it free. I'll kill you. I don't think so, Naruto said, his gaze hardening. With a flick of his wrist, he twisted his hand. The pressure was too much. With a sharp crack, the katana blade snapped in two. The samurai stumbled back, holding the now useless hilt, his face a mask of disbelief. Naruto tossed the broken shard of the blade aside. It clattered on the cobblestones, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. You broke my sword, the samurai sputtered, his rage giving way to a dawning fear. This blade was a gift from Lord Orochi himself. You will pay for this. He can send me the bill, Naruto replied, his tone dismissive. He took a single step forward. The samurai, for all his bluster, was a coward. Faced with a man who could catch a katana with 2 fingers and snap it like a chopstick, his nerve broke completely. He turned and fled, tripping over his own feet as he scrambled away, shouting about reporting this to the palace. Naruto watched him go, then his eyes swept over the crowd. They weren't just staring at him anymore. They were whispering. A current of excitement, of dangerous hope, was passing through them. For the first time in a long time, someone had stood up to Orochi's thugs, and not only one, but made them look like fools. The name they had heard from the refugees of Kuri was now attached to a face. The Golden Fox. He had just made himself the most talked-about man in the capital. Which was exactly what he wanted. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the labyrinthine streets as if he were a ghost. High above, Kage lowered his pistol, which had been trained on the samurai's head the entire time. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod of approval before melting back into the shadows of the rooftop. Deep within a hidden cave, Elara looked up from the strange device. The Arbiter Tracker. It was a marvel of engineering, its internal workings a maze of microscopic circuits and glowing filaments that defied her understanding of physics. The power source is quantum entangled, she murmured to herself, tracing a diagram she had sketched in her notebook. It doesn't just detect energy, it samples its unique signature across dimensions. It's a tracker for the soul. She had managed to access a corrupted data log, a fragment of a transmission from the first scout. Most of it was encrypted gibberish, but a few phrases were terrifyingly clear. Priority alert. Anomaly Class 7. Unsanctioned reality warping capabilities, potential threat to predetermined path. Predetermined path, she whispered. It's not just about power. This is ideological. Suddenly, a proximity alert flashed on the device's screen. A new signature, similar to the first scout but stronger, more stable, was approaching the capital. Fast. Her head snapped up. Kage, she said into the small transponder snail on her workbench. We have incoming. Another one. Profile indicates a higher threat level. Kage's voice, filtered through the snail, was a clipped, static hiss. Location. Rooftops, Sector 7. Moving toward the market square. Toward Naruto's last known position. It's hunting him. On it. The line went dead. Kage was already moving. He flowed across the tiled roofs of the capital, a black phantom against the twilight sky. His enhanced senses, honed by a lifetime of combat, scanned the urban landscape. There. A flicker. A distortion in the air, like heat haze on a cold day. He raised his pistol. The target was almost invisible, cloaked in some kind of light-bending camouflage. But Kage didn't aim for the figure. He aimed for where the figure would be. He fired. A bolt of golden energy screamed through the air. The shot missed, but it served its purpose. The cloaked figure was forced to move, its camouflage shimmering and failing for a split second as it dodged. Kage got a glimpse of it, a sleek, humanoid form in black, form-fitting armor, its face a blank, silver plate. An arbiter assassin. The assassin abandoned its stealthy approach. Two blades, vibrating with a high-frequency hum that made the air buzz, slid from its forearms. It bounded across the rooftops towards Kage, its movements impossibly fast and silent. What followed was a silent, high-speed ballet of death. Kage never stayed still, flipping and dodging, his coat flaring as he fired calculated shots. They weren't meant to kill, they were meant to hurt. To control the space. The assassin was a whirlwind of motion, its vibroblade slicing through roof tiles and support beams, trying to close the distance. Sparks flew as an energy blast glanced off the assassin's forearm. The assassin lunged, one blade slashing at Kage's throat. Kage dropped, twisting, and fired upward, forcing the assassin to leap back. They were perfectly matched in speed and skill, a gunslinger of impossible accuracy against a specter of silent lethality. The assassin paused, its head tilting as if analyzing the situation. It had failed in its primary objective of a silent kill. Engaging in a prolonged, noisy fight was a tactical error. With a final, swift movement, it threw a small disc at Kage's feet. The disc erupted in a blinding flash of light and a deafening sonic boom. By the time Kage's vision cleared, the assassin was gone. It had vanished as completely as it had appeared. Kage stood alone on the rooftop, the scent of ozone and burnt ceramic in the air. He touched his transponder. Target disengaged, he reported, his voice devoid of emotion. Escaped. It's faster and stronger than the scout. They're adapting. Understood, Elara's voice came back, laced with grim understanding. The hunt is escalating. The summons came that evening. It wasn't a formal request or a threatening demand. It was a single, folded note delivered by a child who disappeared as soon as the message was in Naruto's hand. The note contained only a location, a small, disused shrine on the edge of the pleasure district, and a time. Midnight. Naruto went alone. He knew it was a meeting arranged by the Oiran, Komurasaki. He could feel her formidable presence like a beacon in his sage-enhanced senses. The shrine was small, weathered, and forgotten. Moonlight filtered through the branches of a gnarled cherry tree, casting dappled shadows on the stone lanterns. Hiyori was waiting for him, standing before the simple wooden altar. She was no longer Komurasaki. The elaborate kimono was gone, replaced by a simple but fine purple one. The white paint had been washed away, revealing a face of noble, classical beauty, though it was etched with a weariness that no amount of makeup could ever truly hide. Her hair was undone, falling in a straight, black cascade down her back. The performance was over. The fortress had lowered its drawbridge, if only for a moment. "You came," she said. Her voice was different, too. The sing-song, melodic tone of the Oiran was gone, replaced by a clear, steady voice that held the quiet authority of royalty. "You called," Naruto replied simply, stopping a respectful distance away. "Though I was expecting Komurasaki. Komurasaki is a mask. A role I have played for many years," she said, her gaze direct and unflinching. "My name is Hiyori. I am the daughter of Kozuki Oden." Naruto nodded slowly. He had already pieced it together, but hearing it from her lips gave it weight. "I figured as much. The crest in Kuri. Your spirit. It doesn't belong to a courtesan." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "My spirit? It's angry," Naruto stated, not unkindly. "And it's sad. Sadder than anyone I've ever met. But it's not broken. It's waiting." Hiyori's composure, so perfectly maintained, fractured for a second. His perception was unerringly accurate. He saw through the layers she had spent a lifetime building. She looked away, toward the moon. For 20 years, I have waited. I have smiled for the man who murdered my parents. I have entertained the pirates who enslave my people. I have worn a mask of beauty and compliance, all while searching for a fire strong enough to burn this rotten country clean. She turned back to him, her eyes boring into his. Today, in the market, you created a spark. The people are whispering. They have hope. But a spark is not a fire. A spark can be stamped out. What I need is a storm. I'm not a storm, Naruto said. I'm just a guy who doesn't like bullies. Do not be modest with me, stranger, she countered, her voice sharp. The villagers in Kuri speak of a golden god who commands an army of himself and can call food from the heavens. My agents tell me a single man washed ashore and, within a day, secured a foothold, established an intelligence network, and publicly humiliated one of Orochi's top lieutenants without taking a single scratch. You are not just a guy. So I will ask you plainly, what do you want here? Riches? Fame? To carve out a piece of this country for your own? This was the test. His motive. His price. Naruto met her gaze without wavering. His answer was blunt, honest, and utterly incomprehensible to the political world she inhabited. I want the children in the outer villages to have enough food to eat. I want the water to be clean. And I want to see the man responsible for it all get what he deserves. He thought of the old man in Kuri, the starving child, the woman in the market today. I hate tyrants who build their paradise on the graves of everyone else. Hiyori was stunned into silence. She had expected a negotiation, a list of demands, the typical pirate creed of greed and ambition. She had not expected this simple, righteous clarity. It was the same spirit her father, Odin, had possessed. A force that defied conventional logic. She had made her decision before he even arrived, but his answer sealed it. He was the chaotic, unpredictable element she needed. A power that Orochi and Kaido could not anticipate or understand. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. Her next words would change the course of her life, and the fate of Wano. To free this country requires more than just strength, she began, her tone shifting to one of cold, hard strategy. It requires a symbol. My father's children still live. The Kozuki name can still rally the scattered samurai who remain loyal. But they are broken, leaderless. They need a weapon. A figurehead of impossible power to believe in. She took a step closer, her presence immense. You possess that power. Your allegiance would give our cause the unstoppable weapon it needs to face Kaido. But an outsider, a pirate, cannot lead the samurai of Wano. They would never follow you. They would see you as another invader. She stopped directly in front of him, her eyes locking with his in the moonlight. But they would follow the husband of a Kozuki. Naruto blinked. Of all the things he had expected, this was not one of them. Hiyori's voice was as hard and unyielding as steel. This wasn't a romantic proposal. It was a political contract of the highest order. I am offering you an alliance. Your power, your crew, your unwavering will, all dedicated to the liberation of Wano. You will be the sword and the shield of the revolution. In return, I offer you the only thing I have left of true political value. I offer you legitimacy. I offer you the loyalty of the Kozuki retainers and the samurai of this nation. I offer you my hand in marriage. She stood before him, the princess of Wano, offering herself as a bargaining chip to save her homeland. There was no blush on her cheeks, no hint of coyness. Her gaze was that of a queen making a strategic sacrifice on a global chessboard. You will be the nine-tailed admiral, consort to the future shogun. Your children will carry the blood of the Kozuki. Your place in this country will be absolute. This is my demand, she finished, her voice ringing with the finality of an iron decree. Your storm, for my hand. Do you accept this alliance? Naruto stared at her, at this incredible woman who was willing to bind her life to a complete stranger to free her people. He saw the warrior beneath the princess, the strategist beneath the survivor. He respected her. He respected the sheer, unadulterated audacity of her demand. But he wasn't a tool to be wielded, and this wasn't a simple transaction of power for position. If he was going to chain his fate to this country, to her, it had to be for the right reasons. The end of the war was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one. He didn't accept. He didn't refuse. He looked past the contract, past the war, and into the heart of the woman making the demand. He asked the only question that mattered. What kind of world do you want to build after the fighting is done? Chapter 3, The Alliance of Scabbards and Shadows. The question hung in the moonlit air of the dilapidated shrine, heavier than any sword. It was not the response Hiyori had anticipated. She had braced herself for negotiation, for suspicion, for a pirate's greedy acceptance. She had not expected a philosophical inquiry into the nature of her ambition. The question bypassed the warlord she was trying to recruit and spoke directly to the queen she hoped to become. Her iron resolve, the carefully constructed armor she wore, seemed to soften for a moment, revealing the weary soul beneath. Her gaze drifted from Naruto's face to the sprawling, deceptive lights of the capital below. A world, she began, her voice softer now, stripped of the hard edge of command, where a child in curry doesn't mistake an apple for a legend. A world where the rivers run clean, and the laughter in the capital isn't paid for with the silence of the other provinces. I want a Wano where my father's dream of opening its borders is not a crime punishable by death, but a celebration. She looked back at him, her eyes holding a deep, ancient sadness. I want to build a country that is worthy of the sacrifices that have been made for it. A home. Not just a fortress. Her answer was simple, heartfelt, and devoid of personal ambition. It was the answer of a true leader. It was an answer Naruto understood down to his very bones. It was, in its own way, her version of his own dream to become Hokage. A slow smile spread across Naruto's face, a real one this time, bright and genuine. It transformed his features, chasing away the shadows and revealing the charismatic leader his crew followed without question. A home, he repeated, tasting the word. Okay. I can fight for that. He extended his hand. It was not the gesture of a subordinate accepting a commission, nor a groom sealing a contract. It was the gesture of an equal. A partner. You have your alliance, Princess Hiyori. Hiyori looked at his outstretched hand, then back to his smiling face. A weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying seemed to lift from her shoulders. She had gambled everything on this stranger, this anomaly, and he had not only met her expectations but exceeded them. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, and steady. For the first time in 20 years, she felt like she was not entirely alone in her fight. The first step, she said, withdrawing her hand, her mind already shifting back to strategy, is to unite the remaining loyalists. My father's retainers, the 9 red scabbards. They are scattered, hiding. I have a way to contact them. They are gathering, preparing for a final, desperate raid on the beast's den, on Onigashima. They will need to be convinced to trust you. Lead the way, Naruto said. I'm pretty good at making friends. The journey to the Scabbard's secret hideout was a clandestine affair, a path through forgotten tunnels and hidden mountain trails known only to the Kozuki loyalists. Hiyori, now wrapped in a simple traveler's cloak, moved with a familiarity and purpose that spoke of years spent traversing these secret ways. They arrived at a hidden encampment in the forests of Ringo, a place steeped in the cold memory of winter and the valor of old samurai. The reunion between Hiyori and the Scabbards was a tearful, emotional storm. Kinemon, the fiery leader of the group, fell to his knees, his voice choked with 20 years of grief and loyalty as he beheld his lord's daughter, alive and well. Reizo the ninja, the stoic Kikunajo, the boisterous Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, they all gathered around her, a protective wall of battle-hardened love. Then their eyes turned to Naruto. He stood back, allowing them their moment, his arms crossed, his presence calm but undeniably potent. They saw a stranger, a pirate, standing beside their long-lost princess. Their joy immediately became tinged with suspicion. Kinemon rose, his hand resting on the hilt of his swords. He was a man bound by tradition and honor, and his gaze was sharp with distrust. Hiyori-sama, who is this man? Why is an outsider here? This is Naruto Uzumaki, leader of the Fox Pirates, Hiyori announced, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. He is a powerful ally who has pledged his strength to our cause. He will be instrumental in our victory. The scabbards exchanged uneasy glances. An ally? Kinemon questioned, his eyes narrowing on Naruto. We do not need the help of opportunistic pirates. The battle for Wano must be fought by the hands of its samurai. With all due respect, Naruto cut in, his voice even, the hands of your samurai haven't gotten the job done in 20 years. Not because you're weak, but because you're outmatched and outnumbered. You're trying to kill a dragon with needles. The bluntness of his statement was like a physical blow. Several of the scabbards bristled, their hands tightening on their weapons. You dare, Kinemon growled, taking a step forward. I should cut you down for such an insult. I challenge you to a duel. Let us see this power you claim to possess. Naruto didn't even look at him. He looked at the crude map spread on a nearby table, a rough sketch of Wano with enemy encampments marked in charcoal. A duel is a waste of time. You win, you prove you can beat one man. I win, I prove I can beat one man. Kaido has an army of thousands. Our time is better spent figuring out how to beat them. His dismissal of the challenge was more insulting than any direct refusal. Kinemon was about to explode, but Kawamatsu the Kappa, ever the pragmatist, held up a hand. Kin-san, wait. The outsider is insolent, but he is not wrong. A duel proves nothing of strategic value. Let us test his utility instead. Kawamatsu turned his wide, searching eyes to Naruto. You speak of our numbers being insufficient. What can you offer that we do not already possess? Naruto looked from the map to the weary, grim faces of the scabbards. He saw their desperation, their fierce pride, and the thinness of their resources. They were planning a war with whispers and shadows. Information, Naruto said. You're fighting blind. Your intelligence is outdated, based on rumors and risky scouting missions. You don't know their exact numbers, their supply routes, their patrol schedules, the disposition of their forces in real time. You're planning a charge into a fortress without knowing how many soldiers are on the walls. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the map. You need a complete picture of the battlefield. All of it. Now. He made the cross-shaped hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The clearing erupted in a series of smokeless pops. 10, 50, 100, 500, then 1,000 identical Narutos filled the encampment. They stood in perfect formation, a silent, disciplined army that had appeared from thin air. The scabbards stared, their jaws agape, their minds reeling. Reizo, a master of ninja arts, looked as if he had just seen a ghost. This was a technique beyond any ninjutsu he had ever conceived. The original Naruto addressed his army. You have your assignments. Spread out across every province. Udon, Hakamai, Kibi, Ringo, and the flower capital. Be my eyes. Map every enemy patrol. Count every soldier. Identify every supply line, every armory, every weak point. Do not engage. Observe, record, and report. I want a complete tactical overview of Orochi and Kaido's entire military infrastructure by sunrise. Yes, boss, the 1,000 clones replied in perfect, unnerving unison. And then, as one, they vanished, blurring away in every direction with supernatural speed, leaving behind only a gust of wind and 9 utterly dumbfounded samurai. The scabbards were silent for a long time, the scale of what they had just witnessed slowly sinking in. 1,000 invisible, high-speed scouts dispatched across an entire country. It was an intelligence-gathering operation of a scope and efficiency that was, to them, tantamount to divinity. Kinemon stared at the spot where the clone army had been, then at Naruto, who was now calmly studying the map as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The samurai's anger had been replaced by a profound, humbling awe. What kind of sorcery is this?" he whispered. "It's not sorcery," Naruto replied without looking up. "It's just a skill. Now, let's talk strategy. Once my clones report back, we'll know exactly where to strike to hurt them the most." For the rest of the night, the scabbards and Naruto worked. As the clones' memories and information began to flood into Naruto's mind, he updated their crude map with precise, detailed intelligence. "The northern port in Kibi is receiving a massive shipment of weapons tonight. Lightly guarded. A perfect target for a sabotage mission. The commander of the Udon watchtowers is a drunk who abandons his post every night to visit the pleasure district. There's a 2-hour window where surveillance is blind. Orochi has tripled the guard around his personal treasury, but the guards are taking bribes. Morale is low." The information was relentless, granular, and devastatingly effective. Naruto didn't just offer power, he offered a new way to fight. He listened to the scabbards' knowledge of the terrain and their people, integrating his supernatural abilities into their guerrilla warfare tactics. He deferred to Kinemon's experience in leading samurai, suggesting ways his clones could support their traditional fighting styles, creating diversions, setting traps, providing flanking support. He wasn't trying to take over. He was acting as a force multiplier, a tool to make them all more effective. Their respect for him grew with every piece of intelligence he provided, with every insightful strategic suggestion he made. Late into the night, as the others pored over the now crowded map, Naruto stepped away for a moment of quiet. He found Hiyori standing at the edge of the encampment, looking out at the dark, sleeping country. "They're starting to see it," she said softly, not turning to look at him. "They see you're not just a weapon. You're a commander." "I had a lot of practice," Naruto said, his mind flashing back to the endless days and nights of the Fourth Great Ninja War. He stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The energy between them had shifted. The formal tension of the contract had been replaced by the quiet camaraderie of fellow soldiers on the eve of battle. "I had a dream," he said, his voice low. "Back home. I wanted to be Hokage. The leader of my village. Someone who protects everyone, who carries all their pain and their hopes." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "It's a lonely job." Hiyori turned to him then, her eyes reflecting the faint starlight. "My father was the same," she whispered. "He tried to carry the entire country on his shoulders. He danced like a fool for 5 years to save lives, bearing a shame that was not his. He believed in people, even when they didn't believe in him." She looked down, her hands clenched into fists. "I have carried his hope, and my mother's, for 20 years. Sometimes, the weight is unbearable. It's a very lonely thing, to be the last vessel of your family's dream." In that moment, they were not a princess and a pirate. They were just two people, from two different worlds, who understood the profound loneliness of leadership, the crushing burden of a legacy they had not chosen but could not abandon. The alliance, the marriage contract, it was all secondary to this simple, profound point of connection. They were the same. The quiet moment was shattered by a sudden, intense spike of energy that made every hair on Naruto's arm stand on end. He snapped his head up, his sage mode senses screaming a warning. It wasn't a familiar energy. It wasn't hockey. It wasn't a devil fruit. It was cold, artificial, and utterly alien. "Naruto!" Above. Kurama roared in his mind. Naruto's eyes scanned the night sky. He saw them. 5 shooting stars, burning through the atmosphere, but they were moving with controlled trajectories, heading for different points across Wano. They were not meteorites. They were drop pods. "What is it?" Hiyori asked, seeing the grim, focused look on his face. Trouble, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the 5 descending points of light. He could feel their signatures now. They were like the assassin Kage had fought, but stronger, more numerous. Cold, unliving presences that felt like a void in the natural world. They're here. Just then, Elara's voice crackled to life from a small, wrist-mounted transponder snail Naruto wore. Naruto. The Arbiter device is going crazy. It's detecting 5 high-level signatures entering the atmosphere. They're not scouts. The energy profile matches hostile combat units. Hunter-killer designation. Deep in a cloaked vessel in high orbit, the being known as the Seraph watched the deployment on a holographic map of Wano. Its face was a smooth, metallic plate, its form androgynous and inhumanly still. Data streamed across the screen in front of it. Anomaly Uzumaki Naruto. Strategic tier threat confirmed. Clone capability demonstrates logistical and intelligence dominance. Threat to predetermined path, critical. The Seraph's synthesized voice was a flat, toneless hum. Hunter-killer squad deployed. Mission objectives: analyze Anomaly's full combat capabilities. Neutralize associates. Capture or eliminate primary target. Retrieve energy source Kurama. The timeline must be pruned. Back in the Ringo forest, the last of the falling stars vanished behind the mountains. The hunt was on. Naruto turned away from the sky, his face set like stone. The immediate threat wasn't Kaido anymore. It was this new, unknown enemy that was hunting him. Kinemon approached, his face grim. He had seen the look on Naruto's face. What is it? A bad omen? Naruto met his gaze. The time for holding back was over. More enemies, he said. My own, it seems. They're not after Wano. They're after me. Kinemon looked from Naruto's deadly serious expression to the awe-inspiring tactical map they had created, a map that had given them more hope than they'd had in years. He saw Hiyori standing resolute at Naruto's side. Their fate was now tied to this strange, powerful man. His enemies were now their enemies. He drew his swords. Not in a challenge, but in a salute. He bowed his head deeply. Then we will face them with you, Kinemon declared, his voice ringing with the honor of a true samurai. The other scabbards, witnessing his gesture, drew their own weapons and bowed as well. The Kozuki clan is in your debt, Naruto Dano. Your fight is our fight. Naruto looked at the bowing samurai, at Hiyori's unwavering gaze, and felt a familiar warmth spread through his chest. He wasn't just fighting for them anymore. He was fighting with them. He grinned, a fierce, determined expression. All right then. But they're my guests. Let me handle the welcome party. He turned his gaze back to the dark mountains, a dangerous glint in his eyes. They wanted to see my power. Let's give them a show. Chapter 4, The Liberation of Udon. The new intelligence changed everything. The Scabbard's original plan had been a desperate, all-or-nothing charge on Onigashima during the Fire Festival. Naruto, looking at the comprehensive map his clones had provided, saw it for what it was, a suicide mission. You'd be wiped out before you even reached the Skull Dome, he stated bluntly, pointing to the concentration of forces on the main island. But, he continued, his finger tracing a line to the bleak, industrial province of Udon, Kaido's real strength isn't just his top commanders. It's his endless supply of foot soldiers. His numbers. And a huge portion of his potential army is right here. All eyes turned to the spot on the map marked Udon, prisoner mines. The samurai and yakuza who opposed Orochi, rival pirates, anyone strong who wouldn't bow, they're all sent there, Kinemon explained grimly. Forced into slave labor until their spirits break. Thousands of them. Then that's our first move, Naruto declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. Forget the suicidal raid. We conduct a jailbreak. We liberate Udon, free every last prisoner, and turn Kaido's labor camp into our new army. The idea was audacious, radical, and brilliant. It shifted their strategy from a desperate gamble to a calculated power play. The scabbards, energized by a plan that offered a tangible path to victory, readily agreed. The mission was divided. The main samurai force, led by Kinemon, would prepare for the subsequent march, securing the liberated region. A smaller, elite force would handle the liberation itself. And for the core of that mission, Naruto looked to his own crew. The Fox Pirates. It's a fortress inside a quarry, Hiyori said, pointing to the detailed schematics one of Naruto's clones had sketched after getting itself purposefully captured and then dispelling. One main gate. Watchtowers with 360-degree lines of sight. The main prison is a tiered pit, the Sumo Inferno, but the real prize is the thousands of laborers in the outer quarries. The problem is control. Even if we get inside, it'll be chaos. The guards will just slaughter the prisoners in the confusion. So we can't use a frontal assault, Naruto mused. We need a surgical strike. We need to dismantle their ability to command and control before they even know they're under attack. He looked at his crew, a confident glint in his eye. Jean, how do you feel about some creative plumbing? Jean cracked his four-knuckled hands, a wide, predatory grin spreading across his face. Been a while since I got to really let loose. The foundations look weak, resting on loose sediment. I can turn the whole lower level into a mud pit. Kage, Naruto continued, turning his attention to the silent marksman. Those watchtowers are the prison's eyes. I want them blind. Kage simply tapped the barrel of one of his energy pistols. A silent affirmation. Hiyori, you've memorized the layout. You're our guide. You get the prisoners organized once they're free and lead them to the rendezvous point Kawamatsu and Hiyori will secure. Hiyori nodded, her expression sharp and focused. I will not fail. And what about the chaos factor? Jean asked. Someone's got to stir the pot on the inside to keep the guards busy. Naruto smirked. Don't worry. I have a feeling the pot is already about to boil over. His sage mode had detected a ridiculously powerful, rubbery presence at the heart of the Sumo Inferno for days. A familiar, idiotic, and wonderfully disruptive signature. Monkey D. Luffy. We'll just be giving it a little push. As for Naruto himself, his role was simple, be the overwhelming force that shattered the enemy's will to fight. Hiyori, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. I am coming with you. Kinemon immediately protested. Hiyori-sama, it is too dangerous. Your place is here, coordinating the main force. My place is with my people, she countered, her voice firm. Kawamatsu, her loyal guardian, stood beside her, his silence a powerful statement of support. When those prisoners are freed, they will see a banner, a cause, but they need to see more. They need to see a Kozuki. They need to see the face of the freedom they are being asked to fight for. I will be that face. Naruto looked at her, seeing the unbending resolve in her eyes. She wasn't asking for permission. He nodded. All right. But you stay with Kawamatsu and my clones. No heroics. You're too important as a symbol. She met his gaze, a hint of a smile touching her lips. I will endeavor to restrain myself. The operation began under the cloak of a moonless night. While Luffy and Old Man Hyo were unknowingly creating the perfect distraction with their defiant stand in the Sumo Inferno, the Fox Pirates began their silent assault. Miles from the prison, perched on a high, windswept cliff, Kage lay prone. He adjusted the scope on a long-barreled rifle, a custom-built weapon that drew power directly from a pack on his back. It didn't fire bullets. Through the advanced optics, he could see the distant watchtowers of Udon, faint lights in the darkness. He took a breath, his body utterly still. The first watchtower was in his sights. He squeezed the trigger. There was no sound, no muzzle flash. Only a thin, instantaneous beam of incandescent light that shot across the miles-long gap. The watchtower's upper structure vaporized in a silent, contained explosion of superheated air. Before the debris even began to fall, Kage had already lined up his next shot. 1. He fired again. Another tower gone. 2. He was a ghost, erasing the prison's eyes and ears from existence. With methodical, silent perfection. 3. 4. 5. At the base of the quarry, Jean pressed his 4 palms against the rough-hewn rock wall. He closed his eyes, sinking his senses into the stone, feeling the vibrations of the earth, the flow of groundwater deep beneath. Found it, he growled. A massive aquifer, just below the surface. He took a deep stance, his fishman muscles coiling. Fishman karate, vagabond drill. He unleashed a series of powerful, vibrating strikes into the rock. It wasn't brute force that shattered stone, it was a precise application of water manipulation, sending shockwaves through the moisture present in the rock itself. The ground groaned. Cracks spiderwebbed out from his hands. Then, with a deep, subterranean roar, the aquifer ruptured. A geyser of high-pressure water erupted, not upwards, but sideways, blasting through the weakened foundations of the prison's lower levels. Tunnels collapsed. Storehouses flooded. The very ground beneath the prison turned into a churning morass of mud and rock, swallowing guard posts and destabilizing structures. The prison's legs had been cut out from under it. Inside, chaos erupted. Alarms blared as guards slipped and scrambled in the sudden deluge, their command structure instantly shattered. This was the moment. Now! Naruto yelled. He stood on a ridge overlooking the sprawling open-air quarry where thousands of emaciated prisoners were chained to their workstations. He made the seal. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. The ridge exploded with hundreds upon hundreds of Narutos. They poured down into the quarry like a golden tidal wave. They moved with coordinated, terrifying efficiency. They didn't stop to fight every guard. Half the clones immediately went to the prisoners, their hands a blur as they broke chains and shackles with sharp, chakra-infused strikes. "You're free," they yelled in unison, their voices a chorus of liberation. "The Kozuki clan has returned. Fight for your freedom." The other half of the clones engaged the guards. They didn't need Razengans or big jutsu. They used pure, overwhelming numbers and taijutsu. They disarmed, disabled, and neutralized the panicking guards with swift, professional takedowns. A guard would turn to strike a clone, only to be hit from 3 other directions at once. It wasn't a battle, it was a mathematical equation where the guards were always the losing variable. The prisoners, stunned at first, watched as their oppressors were systematically dismantled by an army of golden-haired men. Then they saw the banners, clones holding aloft the Kozuki crest. And then they saw her. Hiyori, flanked by the formidable Kawamatsu and a personal guard of a dozen elite clones, stood on a raised platform, her presence a beacon in the chaos. The simple, noble lines of her face, so like her father's, were unmistakable. "Men of Wano," her voice rang out, amplified by a clone's wind-style jutsu. "I am Kozuki Hiyori. My brother, Momonosuke, lives. The dawn is coming. Take up arms and reclaim your country." The sight of her, the sound of her voice, the impossible reality of their liberation, it ignited a fire in their souls that 20 years of slavery had failed to extinguish. A single, ragged cheer went up, then another, until the entire quarry roared with the sound of thousands of voices, a wave of defiant hope that shook the very mountains. They snatched up the guards' discarded weapons, their own pickaxes and hammers, and turned on their former masters with a furious joy. The prison riot had become a full-blown revolution. While his clones managed the macro battle, the original Naruto moved toward the heart of the prison, where the strongest enemies would be. As he rounded a corner, a massive figure blocked his path. It was a beast pirate's headliner, a hulking man whose lower body had transformed into that of a giant, armored rhinoceros. He was one of the prison wardens, and he looked furious. "You," the rhino gifter bellowed, pointing a club-like arm at Naruto. "You're the one behind this. I'll crush you into a paste." He charged, his horn lowered, the ground shaking with each thunderous step. He was a living battering ram of muscle and rage. But Naruto didn't move. He simply watched the charge, his sage mode feeding him every detail, the flex of the man's muscles, the trajectory of his horn, the slight imbalance in his left foot. Just as the horn was about to impale him, Naruto shifted his weight. It was a subtle, almost lazy movement. He sidestepped the charge, his hand shooting out to grab the horn as it passed. He used the gifter's own momentum, pivoting and pulling. The headliner, expecting to hit an immovable object, found only empty air and a sudden, irresistible tug. He was thrown off balance, stumbling past Naruto and crashing headlong into a solid rock wall with a sickening crunch. He slid to the ground, unconscious. Naruto hadn't even broken a sweat. But the real threat was not for him. His senses flared with a new warning. Another headliner, a woman with the sleek, predatory features of a leopard, her body coiled with deadly Zoan power, had bypassed the main fighting. She had seen Hiyori and was making a beeline for her, a blur of spots and murderous intent, hoping to decapitate the rebellion by killing its symbol. Kawamatsu moved to intercept, his sword flashing, but the leopard gifter was unnaturally fast. She dodged his strike, her claws extended, leaping over a barricade and closing the distance to Hiyori in a heartbeat. "Hiyori-sama!" Kawamatsu cried out in horror. The headliner lunged, her claws aimed straight for Hiyori's throat. She never made it. A flash of yellow. A sound like a thunderclap. Naruto appeared between the attacker and the princess as if he had materialized from the very air. He hadn't used the flying Raijin technique. He had simply moved, his body enhanced by Sage Mode and Kurama's chakra to a speed that defied belief. He caught the headliner's clawed hand in his own, his grip an iron vice. The woman's eyes widened in shock, her full-force attack stopped dead by a single, outstretched palm. He met her feral gaze with one of cold, absolute dominance. He didn't use a Rasengan. He didn't need to. He simply squeezed. There was a sharp, sickening sound of cracking bone. The headliner screamed, an inhuman shriek of pure agony as her hand was crushed in his grip. He twisted his arm and threw her, sending her tumbling through the air like a discarded toy. She crashed into a pile of mining equipment 50 feet away and did not get up. The entire exchange had taken less than a second. Naruto turned, his body still humming with power. The fires of the rebellion raged around them, the sounds of battle and liberation filling the air. But in that small space, there was only silence. He looked at Hiyori, his intense focus softening as he saw she was unharmed. "You all right?" he asked, his voice calm, as if he hadn't just effortlessly neutralized one of Kaido's elite officers. Hiyori stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen power before. She had seen her father's incredible strength. She had seen Kaido's monstrous might. But this was different. This was not the wild, chaotic power of a beast. It was controlled, absolute, and wielded with the casual certainty of a god. He had appeared like a guardian spirit, a golden protector summoned by her desperate hope. In that moment, surrounded by the flames of the world they were building together, she saw him. Not as a contractor, not as a political ally, not as an outsider. She saw a man who had put his body between her and death without a moment's hesitation. The unspoken contract of their alliance, the political necessity of their union, it all melted away, replaced by a dawning, powerful, and entirely unexpected wave of affection. She couldn't speak. She could only nod, her wide eyes locked on his. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't the clash of steel or the roar of the crowd. It was a series of high-pitched, electronic whines. Naruto's head snapped around. "Get back," he yelled, pushing Hiyori behind him as Kawamatsu rushed to her side. 5 figures landed in the center of the quarry, their descents cushioned by jets of blue energy. They were the hunter-killer squad. Sleek, chrome-and-black cyborgs, their faces blank metallic plates, their bodies bristling with concealed weaponry. They completely ignored the ongoing battle, their glowing red optical sensors swiveling and locking onto a single target, Naruto. Anomaly detected, one of them said, its voice a synthesized monotone. Associates identified. Commencing diagnostic engagement. They moved as one, a hive mind of deadly intent. One cyborg's arms morphed into high-frequency blades as it charged. Another's shoulder panels opened to reveal missile pods. A third fired a net of crackling energy designed to dampen and neutralize foreign power sources. This was a different kind of fight. They weren't driven by rage or ambition. They were cold, calculating machines. Naruto's Sage Mode precognition was pushed to its limit, dodging blades, energy blasts, and containment fields from 5 directions at once. He couldn't hold back. He formed a Rasengan, but as he slammed it into one of the cyborg's chests, the machine's armor glowed, absorbing a significant portion of the impact. It was thrown back but was far from destroyed. Energy signature analyzed, its internal speakers chimed. Rotational chakra compression. Threat level, moderate. They were learning. This wasn't just an attack, it was a data-gathering mission. Kurama. They're analyzing my jutsu. Then show them something they can't analyze. The fox roared. Naruto's hands blurred through seals. Wind style, Rasen Shuriken. A screeching, shuriken-shaped vortex of wind chakra formed in his hand. The sound alone was enough to make nearby prisoners and guards clutch their ears. He hurled it. The spinning blade of wind flew toward the cyborgs. They didn't try to block it. Instead, one of them fired a projectile that exploded mid-air, creating a localized vacuum field. The Rasen Shuriken imploded on itself, its microscopic wind blades dissipating harmlessly. Spatial distortion and cellular-level kinetic blades, another cyborg noted calmly. Threat level, high. Uploading combat data. One of the cyborgs, battered but still functional, broke from the pack and began to retreat, its sole purpose now to escape with the priceless data. Naruto saw it. He wasn't going to let them get away with a blueprint to his powers. He poured more chakra into his movements, his body becoming a golden blur. He appeared before the escaping cyborg, his fist cocked back. It was a simple punch, but it was infused with so much raw sage chakra that the air itself seemed to distort around it. He drove his fist through the cyborg's chest, shattering its power core in a shower of sparks and blue energy. He then turned back to the remaining 4, his expression grim. He dispatched them with a brutal, overwhelming display of taijutsu and precisely placed Rasengans, smashing them into scrap metal. But he knew the damage was done. The data had been sent. He stood amidst the wreckage of the advanced machines, breathing heavily. The liberation of Udon was a resounding success. But the victory felt hollow. He had won the battle, but he may have just given his true enemy the weapon they needed to win the war. As the sun began to rise, it illuminated a new Wano. The prisoner mines of Udon had become the first liberated territory of the Kozuki rebellion. The thousands of freed prisoners, their spirits rekindled, roared the name of their new heroes, Kozuki Momonosuke, the Red Scabbards, and a new name, chanted with a fervor that bordered on religious, the Golden Fox Admiral. Naruto stood on the highest watchtower, or what was left of it, surveying the scene. His crew and the Scabbards were organizing the new recruits, tending to the wounded, securing the perimeter. It was the dawn of a new army. Hiyori climbed the tower and stood beside him, the morning wind catching her dark hair. "You have given my people hope," she said, her voice filled with a quiet awe as she looked out at the cheering masses. "That's all I've ever wanted to do," he replied, his gaze distant. He wasn't looking at the celebrating army. He was looking up, at the pale blue sky, where an enemy he couldn't see was watching, learning, and preparing. Chapter 5, The quiet before the red storm. The air in Wano changed after the liberation of Udon. It was a subtle shift, but a palpable one. Hope, once a contraband emotion whispered in secret, was now a tangible currency being spent freely in the liberated territories. The news of the jailbreak spread like wildfire, carried by Naruto's clones and ecstatic refugees, fanning the embers of rebellion across the blighted provinces. For the first time in 2 decades, the monolithic power of Kaido and Orochi seemed to have a crack in its foundation. The days leading up to the Fire Festival were a blur of frantic, focused activity. The liberated Udon became the staging ground for the nascent rebel army. Under the joint command of the Scabbards and the Fox Pirates, a force was being forged. The samurai of the Kozuki clan trained the freed prisoners, turning desperate men into disciplined soldiers. Ilara's strategic mind organized supply lines, transforming a chaotic mob into a functional military force. Jean and the freed fishman prisoners taught their unique brand of karate, preparing for amphibious assaults. Kage, from the shadows, trained a small, elite unit of snipers and scouts, his silent instruction creating a new generation of unseen eyes for the rebellion. Naruto himself was the heart of the operation. He was a whirlwind of ceaseless energy. One moment he was sparring with the samurai, his dynamic and unpredictable fighting style forcing them to adapt and evolve beyond their rigid traditions. The next, he was using his clones to rapidly construct fortifications, repair infrastructure, or distribute food to the swelling ranks of rebels and refugees. He was a leader, a logistician, a drill sergeant, and a symbol of impossible power all at once. His magnetic presence and clear-headed decisiveness unified the disparate factions, samurai, yakuza, pirates, and minks, into a single, cohesive army. The Fox Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates, whose own chaotic exploits had contributed significantly to the liberation, finally had a chance to interact. The meeting was less a formal alliance and more a boisterous collision of two profoundly different, yet strangely compatible, crews. On a makeshift training ground, Zoro and Kage stood opposite each other. Zoro, a grin of anticipation on his face, had his hands on his 3 swords. Kage stood motionless, his twin energy pistols held loosely at his sides. "So, you're the masked gunman," Zoro said, his voice a low rumble of challenge. "I've never tried to cut an energy beam before. Let's see if my blades are sharp enough." Kage didn't respond with words. He simply raised one pistol and fired a single, precise shot at a distant rock pinnacle a mile away. The top third of the pinnacle vaporized without a sound. Zoro's grin widened. "I like you," he declared. Nearby, Jean and Jinbe, the helmsmen of the Sun Pirates, sat cross-legged, sharing a cup of sake. They were 2 masters of the same art, 2 sons of the sea who had walked different paths. To use the water within the stone itself, Jinbe mused, his expression one of deep respect. "Your control of fishman karate is formidable, Jin-san. You have taken its core principles in a direction I never considered." Jean took a deep drink, the sake looking like a thimble in his massive hand. "Slavery teaches you to find water in a desert, Jinbe Dano. Naruto Taishu taught me to turn it into a flood." Their conversation was not of rivalry, but of shared philosophy, a quiet understanding between 2 great warriors of the sea. Ilara and Nico Robin, meanwhile, were huddled over a series of poneglyph rubbings Ilara had acquired from her travels. They were kindred spirits, 2 scholars who bore the heavy burden of forbidden knowledge, hunted by a world that feared the truth. "This passage here," Robin said, her finger tracing a strange symbol, "it doesn't align with the syntax of the other historical poneglyphs. It's almost like a footnote, a warning. It speaks of arbiters of the sequence," Ilara added, her voice a low whisper, sharing a piece of the data she'd decrypted from the hunter's device. "A force that prunes timelines that deviate from a predetermined path. I believe they are connected. The true history the world government wants to erase isn't just about the void century. It's about their control over reality itself." Their shared discovery sent a chill through the air, the grand conspiracy of the world growing deeper and more terrifying. The eve of the Fire Festival arrived. The final preparations were complete. A fleet of commandeered ships and makeshift vessels was hidden in a secluded bay, ready to sail for Onigashima under the cover of the festival's storm. The mood was a strange cocktail of fierce anticipation and somber gravity. For many, it would be their last night alive. Naruto, for the first time in days, found a moment of stillness. He needed to build his reserves. The coming battle would demand more of him than any fight since he'd arrived in this world. He sat atop the highest peak overlooking Udon, his legs crossed, his eyes closed. He sank into meditation, drawing the vast, pure natural energy of Wano into himself. The land, though sick and scarred, was still ancient and powerful. He could feel its life force, its mountains, its great trees, all pouring their strength into him. He was becoming one with the island he was about to fight for. But as he sank deeper into the natural world, he felt it. It was a void. A chilling, terrifying emptiness that had not been there before. It was in the northernmost region of Wano, a place of snow and ice. It felt like a black hole had opened in the fabric of nature itself, a spot on the living tapestry of the world that was just gone. It was an anti-life, anti-nature presence, and it was consuming the natural energy around it at an alarming rate, drawing it in, absorbing it. "Kit, that's it," Kurama's voice was a low, dangerous growl in his mind. "That's the one from before. The one who feels like death. It is no longer hiding in orbit. It's on the ground. And it is gathering power." Naruto's eyes snapped open, the red-orange pigment of sage mode stark against his skin. This wasn't a hunter-killer. This was a predator of a higher order. This was the one in command. The Seraph. And it was here, on Wano, powering up for a confrontation. A confrontation it clearly expected. It knows I can sense it, Naruto realized. This isn't just preparation. It's a challenge. He pushed the thought aside. One dragon at a time. First Kaido, then the ghost from the stars. He stood, his sage cloak manifesting on his shoulders, his power reserves now brimming. He took a deep breath of the cold mountain air, the quiet before the storm. He found Hiyori by the edge of a cliff, away from the boisterous energy of the assembled army. A single, resilient cherry tree, a survivor from a healthier age, bloomed beside her. She was not dressed as a princess or a courtesan, but as a warrior, in a functional, dark purple combat kimono, her father's revered blade, aim no habakiri, strapped to her waist. She wasn't looking at the army. She was playing her shamisen. The melody was not one of the lively tunes of the capital, nor a rousing battle hymn. It was a quiet, somber lullaby, a song of memory and loss. It was a song for the ghosts of the past, and for those who were about to join them. Naruto approached slowly, not wanting to break the spell. He stood beside her, listening, until the last note faded into the wind. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "It was my mother's favorite," Hiyori replied, her fingers resting on the strings. "She would sing it to Momonosuke and me when we were children. Before everything." She looked at the shamisen, a sad smile on her face. "For 20 years, this was all I had left of her. This, and the memory of her smile." The air between them was thick with unspoken things. The political contract, the grand alliance, it all felt like a lifetime ago. They were two people on the precipice of a battle that could claim either of their lives. "I get it," Naruto said, his gaze distant. He sat on the ground near her, a rare weariness in his posture. "My parents, they died the day I was born. They gave their lives to protect our village, and to seal a monster inside their newborn son." He tapped his stomach, a wry, self-deprecating gesture. "I grew up alone. Hated. I didn't know their names. I didn't know what they looked like. All I had was a dream that one day, if I became a great hero, I would make them proud." He looked at her, his blue eyes holding a vulnerability he rarely showed. "I didn't meet them until much later. Just echoes of them. But I learned they never stopped loving me. never stopped believing in me. Hiyori stopped playing. She looked at this man who radiated so much power and confidence, and saw, for the first time, the lonely little boy he had once been. A boy who, like her, had grown up in the shadow of his parents' immense legacy. For so long, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, I hid behind the mask of Komurasaki. I smiled, and I danced, and I played this shamisen for our enemies. And every day, I was terrified. Terrified that I would forget my own face. That I would forget the feel of my father's hand, the sound of my mother's song. That I would become the mask. She placed the shamisen gently on the ground and turned to face him fully. But when I am with you, I don't feel like I have to hide. You don't see a princess, or a courtesan, or a symbol. You just see, me. I see a fighter, Naruto corrected gently. Someone who never gave up, even when she was all alone. The gap between them seemed to shrink, the space filled with a powerful, unspoken understanding. This was the foundation they had built, not on politics or power, but on shared pain, shared loneliness, and a shared, desperate hope for a better future. He reached out, not in a grand romantic gesture, but with a simple, human need for connection. He gently took her hand. Her fingers were slender and calloused from years of playing the shamisen, her hand was cold. His was warm, strong, and enveloped hers completely. It was not the hand of a groom claiming his bride. It was the hand of a comrade, a partner, a friend, offering silent strength. A promise. You are not alone anymore. We will see the dawn together. Hiyori's fingers tightened around his. A single tear, the first she had allowed herself to shed in a long, long time, escaped. Her eye traced a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. The low, resonant sound of a horn echoed from the bay below. It was time. They stood up, their hands still clasped. The moment of quiet intimacy was over. The storm was here. They walked back to the command center, where the final briefing was to take place. As they entered, the assembled leaders, the scabbards, Law, the Straw Hats Corps members, all fell silent, their eyes drawn to the two figures standing shoulder to shoulder, their hands linked. It was a sight more powerful than any speech. The union of Wano's royal blood and the monstrous power of the Golden Fox, made manifest. This was no longer just an alliance. It was a bond. The fleet set sail as twilight bled into night. A fierce storm, as predicted by Kinemon's clever planning, churned the seas, providing the perfect cover for their approach to the fortress of devils. The ships bucked and groaned, cutting through monstrous waves under the flashes of lightning. On the deck of the Shinobi's Will, which had been hastily but expertly repaired by Frankie and a team of Wano's best shipwrights, Naruto and Hiyori stood at the prow. The cold sea spray lashed at their faces, but they didn't flinch. Their gazes were fixed on the horizon, where a hellish red glow pulsed against the dark clouds. Onigashima. The island shaped like a demonic skull, its mouth a gaping cavern from which the sounds of raucous music and drunken laughter spilled, a stark insult to the suffering country around it. The political contract was a distant memory. The ironclad demand was forgotten. All that remained was a shared resolve. He was fighting for her home. She was fighting for her people. And somewhere along the way, they had started fighting for each other. As the demonic island grew closer, Naruto's sage-enhanced hearing picked up the faint, chilling hum from the northern mountains, a low thrum of gathering power that was a counterpoint to the raucous noise from Onigashima. Two dragons waited for him. One of flesh and fury, the other of cold, hard science and cosmic judgment. He squeezed Hiyori's hand. She squeezed back, her gaze never leaving the hell that awaited them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 6, A Fox's Dance on Demon Island. The chaos of the landing was a symphony of coordinated mayhem. Under the cover of the raging storm and the thunderous noise of the fire festival, the Allied fleet crashed upon the shores of Onigashima. The samurai, screaming battle cries that had been silenced for 20 years, poured onto the island like a vengeful tide. The Straw Hats, a force of joyous destruction, carved their own chaotic path toward the main entrance. Amidst it all, the Fox Pirates operated with the chilling precision of a scalpel. Their objective, laid out by Naruto and Law, was not to join the frontal assault but to cripple the beast from within. The Smile Factory and the armories beneath the main dome are the source of Kaido's endless fodder, Law had explained, pointing to a blueprint of the fortress. We take those out, and we stop their reinforcements cold. As the main force drew the attention of the outer guards, a small, unassuming fishing boat slipped into a hidden cove on the island's far side. From it, Jean, Elara, and Kage disembarked, melting into the shadows of the rock formations. Jean placed his hands on the cliff face, feeling the vibrations. There's a network of underwater tunnels here. Used for waste disposal from the lower levels. The current is strong, but it'll take us right where we need to be. The path will be a labyrinth, Elara stated, unfurling a detailed map she had drawn from the clone's intelligence. But I have the route memorized. Follow me, and we won't get lost. Kage simply cocked his pistols, the soft hum of their energy cores the only sound he made. He was ready. Without another word, the three of them slipped into the churning, dark water, a ghost squad on a mission of sabotage. Meanwhile, on the main battlefield, Naruto was not a single warrior, he was a legion. He stood at the head of the charge, a blazing sun of golden chakra in the dark, stormy night. He created 1,000 clones on the spot, a veritable army that instantly fanned out across the island, bolstering every front. Go, he commanded, his voice a clarion call over the din of battle. One squad of 200 clones, each wielding a chakra-infused staff, slammed into the main beast pirate defense line, creating a solid wall of offense and defense that allowed the samurai to push forward without being overwhelmed. Another 50 clones, masters of evasion and stealth, appeared at the side of the red scabbards as they made their legendary charge toward the back entrance to face Kaido. The clones acted as a perfect support unit, intercepting cannon fire with perfectly timed wind bursts and engaging any of Kaido's men who tried to flank the determined samurai, ensuring the scabbards had a clear path to their fated confrontation. A smaller, more specialized group of clones appeared around Chopper as the reindeer doctor began to realize the horror of Queen's Ice Oni plague. They formed a protective perimeter, their bodies a living shield, giving Chopper the precious, uninterrupted time he needed to analyze the virus and formulate a cure. Naruto was the ultimate battlefield commander, a single man acting as an entire army corps, his clones reinforcing weak points, exploiting openings, and turning the tide of a dozen separate skirmishes simultaneously. The beast pirates, accustomed to fighting disorganized rabble, had no answer for this level of tactical omniscience. It was like fighting a hydra, for every head they cut down, 2 more appeared somewhere else. The original Naruto, clad in his sage mode cloak, moved through the battlefield like a phantom. He wasn't seeking out a glorious duel. He was putting out fires. He appeared just in time to block a cannonball aimed at a group of struggling samurai, then vanished, only to reappear a moment later to disarm a gifter who had cornered a squad of minks. His movements were economical, his takedowns brutally efficient. He was the linchpin holding the entire invasion together. His path eventually led him inside the Skull Dome, a cavernous, debaucherous hall where the party raged on, oblivious to the war outside. And there, standing on the main performance stage, were 2 of the 3 pillars of the beast pirates. King the Conflagration, silent and imposing in his black leather, his back wreathed in flames. Queen the Plague, a grotesque, cybernetically enhanced giant, dancing absurdly to the music. Marco the Phoenix, a whirlwind of blue flame, was already engaging them, his legendary regenerative powers allowing him to hold his own against 2 Yonko commanders at once. But it was a losing battle. He was a shield, buying time, and that shield was beginning to crack. Naruto saw it in a flash. Marco was being worn down. King's speed and raw power, combined with Queen's relentless barrage of lasers and cheap tricks, were too much for one man, no matter how powerful. With a burst of speed, Naruto shot across the hall, a golden comet that landed on the stage right beside Marco. Looks like you could use a hand, Naruto said with a grin, not even out of breath. Marco glanced at him, a flicker of surprise and relief in his weary eyes. The golden fox. Heard you were making a scene. Didn't think you'd be this flashy, you are. Queen stopped dancing, his cyborg eye zooming in on Naruto. Boo. Who's this little pipsqueak? Another fly buzzing into our party? King said nothing. He simply drew the sword at his hip, the flames on his back intensifying. His masked gaze fixed on Naruto, recognizing a genuine threat. Go, Naruto said to Marco. Help Chopper with the virus. Reinforce the main hull. I'll keep these two busy. Busy? Marco laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. Kid, that's king and queen. They're worth over 2 billion berries combined. You can't just keep them busy. Watch me, Naruto said, his grin fading, replaced by a look of serene, absolute focus. He settled into his fighting stance, the air around him crackling with natural energy. Marco hesitated for a second, then saw the unshakable confidence in Naruto's eyes. He nodded. Don't die, you are. With a final, powerful kick that sent Queen stumbling back, Marco transformed into his phoenix form and flew off, a streak of blue flame heading for the main floor. Now, it was 2-on-1. Insolent brat. Queen roared, offended by the slight. He fired a volley of laser beams from his mouth. How dare you ignore me, the great queen? Naruto didn't dodge. He simply moved. His sage mode precognition was a perfect symphony of danger awareness. He weaved between the laser beams as if they were moving in slow motion, the heat of them singing the air inches from his face. As he closed the distance, King appeared in front of him, a black-winged blur, his sword slashing down in a fiery arc. Naruto raised his hand, a Rasengan spinning to life in his palm. He met the sword strike not with a block, but with a collision. The Rasengan ground against the flaming blade, the screech of protesting metal and compressed chakra filling the air. The force of the impact sent a shockwave that shattered the stage beneath them. King was pushed back, his arm vibrating from the sheer grinding power of the attack. He stared at his sword, which now had a network of fine cracks near the point of impact. No one had ever damaged his blade before. Before King could recover, Queen charged from the side, transforming his neck into that of a brachiosaurus and attempting to constrict Naruto. But Naruto was already gone, leaving behind only a puff of smoke. A clone. The real Naruto was in the air, above them. Giant Rasengan, he yelled, a massive sphere of spinning chakra, the size of a boulder, held in his hands. He brought it down on them. Queen shrieked and fired his lasers, while King unleashed a flurry of fiery projectiles from his wings. The attack slammed into the giant Rasengan, causing a massive, blinding explosion that vaporized the entire stage and sent a hurricane-force whine through the hull. When the smoke cleared, Naruto stood in the crater, unharmed, while King and Queen had been thrown to opposite sides of the room. He was holding them. Two of Kaido's all-stars. He was fighting them to a standstill, single-handedly. The beast pirates in the hull stared in stunned disbelief. This was a level of power that was supposed to be reserved for emperors. Even as he fought this high-stakes battle, a part of Naruto's consciousness was always elsewhere, linked to the clone squad protecting Hiyori. He had given her a mission of her own, one born of vengeance and catharsis. Accompanied by a dozen of his clones and a retinue of loyal samurai, she was moving through the chaos of the castle, her destination the one place she knew she would find the snake who had destroyed her family, Orochi's private chambers. His sensory link flared with a sudden warning. Ambush. Hiyori's group was moving down a gilded hallway when the walls, painted with elaborate murals, suddenly slid away. From the hidden passages, a flood of Anuwabenshu, Orochi's personal ninja guard, poured out, led by their leader, Fukurokuju. They were surrounded. Kozuki Hiyori, Fukurokuju rasped, his unnaturally long head seeming to stretch in the torchlight. Your luck has finally run out. Lord Orochi will be pleased to see your head. The Oniwabanshu charged. But they didn't meet terrified samurai. They met a wall of golden clones. Hiyori-sama, go, one of the clones yelled, blocking a volley of shuriken with a spinning kunai. We'll handle these clowns. Hiyori hesitated, her hand on her sword. But she trusted Naruto. She trusted his plan. With a nod to her samurai guards, she broke through a weak point in the ninja cordon and continued her determined path toward Orochi's chambers. Back on the main stage, Naruto felt the clones engage the Oniwabanshu. For a fraction of a second, his focus was split. He was calculating two battles at once, directing his clones from miles away while simultaneously fighting two of the most dangerous pirates in the world. It was a fatal millisecond of distraction. King, moving with the impossible speed of his Lunarian race, appeared directly behind him. Imperial deep-fried steak, he intoned, his leg wreathed in fire as he unleashed a devastating dive kick. Naruto's Sage Mode screamed a warning, but his body was a fraction too slow to react perfectly. He twisted, trying to dodge, but the fiery kick still caught him square in the shoulder. The force was immense, like being hit by a meteorite. The pain was searing. He was blasted across the hall, skipping off the floor like a stone on water before crashing into a thick stone pillar, shattering it on impact. He slumped to his knees, his arm hanging limp and useless, his sage cloak flickering. He coughed, a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. Queen cackled with glee. Ha ha ha. See? Not so tough after all. You let your guard down, you little punk. Naruto pushed himself up, his gaze never leaving King. The Lunarian stood impassively, flames still dancing on his back. Your attention is divided, King stated, his voice a cold, flat monotone. You cannot fight us and command an army at the same time. A fatal flaw. Naruto grinned, a bloody, defiant expression. Maybe. He forced his dislocated shoulder back into its socket with a sickening pop, gritting his teeth against the wave of agony. Or maybe I just wanted to see what you had. He closed his eyes, drawing on a deeper well of power. The damage from the Arbiter attack, the strain of maintaining 1,000 clones, this fresh injury, it was all taking a toll. But he wasn't done yet. His focus narrowed. The link to Hiyori's group was now a razor's edge. They were close. Orochi was cornered, terrified, his shrieks of cowardice audible even to the clones outside his door. Naruto had to create an opening. Not just for himself, but for Luffy, who he could sense was now on the roof, beginning his epic confrontation with Kaido. Naruto's role wasn't to defeat King and Queen. It was to be the anvil upon which the Straw Hat Captain could hammer out a victory. And to be the shield for Hiyori's justice. He took a deep breath, and his chakra exploded outwards. He entered his Kurama chakra mode, his body igniting in a shroud of brilliant, golden energy, the markings on his coat turning black and sharp. The power radiating from him was so immense it made the air tremble. His injuries vanished, healed by the fox's potent chakra. King and Queen both took an involuntary step back. This was a different level of power entirely. All right, Naruto said, his voice now layered with a low, animalistic growl. Round 2. He vanished. Not with a burst of speed, but in a flash of pure yellow light, the body flicker technique, pushed to its absolute limit by Kurama's chakra. He appeared before Queen, his fist cocked back. Planetary Rasengan. A large Rasengan with several smaller ones orbiting it, like moons around a planet, slammed into Queen's cybernetic stomach. The force wasn't just a punch, it was a multi-directional vortex of grinding destruction. Queen's massive body folded around the attack, his cyborg enhancement sparking and shorting out as he was blasted across the dome like a cannonball, crashing through the outer wall and disappearing into the night. One down. King reacted instantly, his wings flaring as he launched himself at Naruto, his sword a streak of fire. But in this new mode, Naruto was faster. He met King's charge head-on, their battle becoming a series of blindingly fast clashes, golden light against black flame, shockwave after shockwave rocking the foundations of the castle. He was pushing King back, forcing one of Kaido's mighty all-stars into a desperate defense. He saw the opening he needed. He feinted an attack to the left, then spun, channeling a massive amount of chakra into his leg. He landed a devastating axe kick on King's sword arm, shattering the bone and sending the Lunarian's precious katana flying. King staggered back, clutching his broken arm, his silent mask finally showing a crack in its stoic facade. He was beaten. But Naruto didn't press the advantage. He didn't go for the finishing blow. He had done his job. He had taken 2 of Kaido's 3 right-hand men off the board, creating the breathing room the Alliance desperately needed. He could sense Luffy on the rooftop, his haki blooming as he clashed with Kaido. He could sense Hiyori standing before a barred door, her heart pounding with 2 decades of hate and hope. He turned his back on the defeated King. "Where are you going?" King snarled, trying to push himself up. "The fight isn't over." "My part is," Naruto said without looking back. "You were just the opening act." And with a final, brilliant flash of yellow light, he vanished from the main stage, leaving behind a defeated commander, a ruined hall, and a legend that would be told for centuries. He reappeared in the quiet, tense hallway outside Orochi's chambers. The Oniwabanshu lay defeated, bound and unconscious, dealt with by his clones. Hiyori stood before the reinforced door, her hand trembling slightly as she held her father's sword. She turned as he appeared, her eyes wide. He was still cloaked in the golden fire of Kurama's chakra, an avatar of righteous power. "Naruto," she breathed. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, the intense battle fury in his eyes softening as he looked at her. He gestured to the door, behind which the pathetic wails of the shogun could be heard. "This is your fight, Hiyori," he said, his voice gentle but firm. He placed himself between her and any potential reinforcements, his back to the door, his golden form a silent, absolute guardian. "I'll keep the pests away." Chapter 7, The Seraph's Judgment. The princess's blade. The chamber door was made of reinforced steel, but it offered no comfort to the man cowering behind it. Kurazumi Orochi, shogun of Wano, was a cornered rat. He could hear the fighting outside, the screams of his guards, the terrifying silence that had followed. He was alone. With a splintering crash, the door buckled inwards, torn from its hinges by Kawamatsu's immense strength. It fell to the floor with a deafening clang, revealing the scene within, a lavish room, filled with plundered gold and priceless art, and in the center, the trembling, multi-headed form of the shogun, his Yamata no Orochi devil fruit awakened in a desperate, pathetic display of fear. Hiyori stepped across the threshold, her gait steady, her eyes burning with a cold, focused fire. Kawamatsu and the other samurai fanned out, securing the room, their blades ready. But they did not advance. They knew this moment did not belong to them. Naruto remained in the hallway, his golden chakra cloak casting long, dancing shadows. He stood as a silent sentinel, a living wall ensuring that this final, terrible reunion would not be interrupted. His senses were stretched thin, one part of him here, guarding Hiyori's retribution, another part feeling the cataclysmic battle on the roof where Luffy's heartbeat hammered against Kaido's like a drum of war, and a third, colder part, was aware of the silent, predatory void in the north, gathering its strength. "You!" Orochi shrieked, his 8 serpent heads weaving and hissing, his human face a mask of spittle-flecked terror. "Kozuki! You're supposed to be dead. All of you are supposed to be dead. And yet we remain," Hiyori said, her voice devoid of emotion. It was a terrifyingly calm sound, the quiet at the heart of a hurricane. She took a step forward, her hand resting on the hilt of Aim no Habakiri. "Stay back," one of the serpent heads hissed. "I am the shogun. Kaido will protect me. He will kill all of you." "Kaido used you, you pathetic worm," Hiyori stated, each word a carefully placed stone on his grave. "He used your jealousy, your pettiness, your bottomless hunger for revenge, and he let you poison this country while he built his army. You were never a king. You were just the groundskeeper in his weapons factory. Her words struck a deeper blow than any sword could. She wasn't just here to kill him, she was here to dismantle him, to strip away the stolen titles and false power until only the sniveling, resentful creature beneath was left exposed. Lies. Orochi screamed, his head thrashing. I did this for my family. For the Kurazumi clan. For the persecution we suffered. The Kurazumi were wronged, Hiyori acknowledged, her voice dangerously soft. They suffered an injustice. And you answered that injustice by becoming a monster 1,000 times worse than those you hated. You starved children. You poisoned rivers. You enslaved your own people. You laughed and feasted while the families of Kuri boiled stones for soup. She took another step. The room seemed to shrink, the torchlight dimming until only the two of them existed. You didn't do this for the Kurazumi, she condemned, her voice rising with righteous fury. You did it for yourself. Because you are small. And weak. And the only way you could ever feel tall was by forcing an entire nation to its knees. This was her judgment. The culmination of 20 years of silent, burning hatred, delivered not with a scream, but with a final, damning verdict. Orochi's blustering rage finally broke, collapsing into pure, animal terror. He saw it in her eyes, the ghost of Odin, the will of the Kozuki, the unquenchable spirit of Wano itself, come to claim its due. With a final, desperate shriek, his 8 heads lunged forward, venomous fangs bared, a last, cowardly attempt to take his executioner with him. Hiyori did not flinch. She did not retreat. In one fluid, graceful motion, she drew her father's blade. Aim no Habakiri, the sword that could slice the heavens, sang as it left its scabbard. The blade was a flash of silver moonlight in the dim room. This is for my father, she whispered. She swung. It was not a wild, hateful slash, but a single, perfect strike, imbued with the weight of 20 years and the samurai spirit she had inherited. The blade cut through the air, clean and final. One by one, the serpent heads fell, severed in a single, flowing arc. They hit the floor with a series of wet, heavy thuds. The last head, the one with Orochi's human face, stared at her, its eyes wide with a final, uncomprehending shock before it, too, tumbled away. The massive reptilian body crashed to the floor, twitching for a moment before falling still. Silence. The curse was broken. The snake was dead. Hiyori stood over the body, her chest heaving, the sword held loosely at her side. Tears streamed down her face, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. 20 years of pain, of fear, of wearing a suffocating mask, all washed away in that single, cathartic act of justice. It was her victory. Earned. Absolute. Kawamatsu and the samurai knelt, their heads bowed in silent, profound respect for their princess, their warrior. It was in this moment of solemn victory that the temperature in the room plummeted. A chilling frost spread across the floor from the far wall, and the torchlight flickered and died, plunging the room into an unnatural twilight. Naruto, still standing guard in the hall, spun around. His Kurama cloak flared as a figure phased through the solid stone wall behind Hiyori as if it were smoke. It was the seraph. It was taller than a normal human, its form slender and eerily graceful, clad in a seamless, matte black material that seemed to drink the light. Its face was a smooth, silver plate, devoid of any features, reflecting a distorted, warped image of the room. It radiated an aura of absolute zero, a palpable void where life and energy ceased to exist. It had finished gathering its power. The seraph completely ignored the dead shogun and the stunned samurai. Its head tilted, its blank faceplate fixing on Hiyori for a fraction of a second before dismissing her as irrelevant. Its sole focus was the blazing golden figure in the hallway. A voice, synthesized, calm, and utterly devoid of inflection, emanated from its body. Anomaly designation, Uzumaki Naruto. Primary energy source, Kurama. You are in violation of the World Balance Accords. The predetermined path must be maintained. Surrender the source, or face eradication. Get behind me. Naruto yelled at Hiyori. He didn't wait for a response. He launched himself forward, appearing in front of her in a golden flash, his body a shield between her and this new, cosmic horror. I don't know who you are, Naruto snarled, his eyes glowing with feral intensity, but you picked a really bad time to show up. Time is a variable we control, the seraph stated. It raised a hand, its palm open. Your energy is anathema to this reality. It will be purged. Naruto didn't waste time with words. He formed a Rasengan, infusing it with Sage Mode to give it an extra kick, and slammed it directly into the seraph's chest. And then, the impossible happened. The Rasengan, his signature technique, a condensed vortex of destructive power, didn't explode. The moment it made contact with the seraph's body, it simply fizzled. The chakra was absorbed, drawn into the seraph's form like water into a sponge, leaving not even a scorch mark. Naruto stared in shock. Naruto, it's eating your chakra. Kurama roared. Don't use ninjutsu. The seraph retaliated. It didn't throw a punch. It simply jabbed its fingers forward in a precise, surgical strike. Aimed at Naruto's chest. The speed was incredible, faster than King. Naruto barely had time to cross his arms to block. The impact felt like being stabbed with icicles. A wave of numbing cold shot through him, and his chakra cloak wavered violently. The seraph's attack wasn't designed to break bones, it was designed to disrupt and sever chakra pathways. It was a perfect anti-shinobi weapon. Naruto leaped back, putting distance between them. This was a nightmare opponent. His ninjutsu was useless. Its taijutsu was a direct counter to his very life force. He was left with only pure Sage Mode physical combat and strategy. He moved, his body a blur, launching a furious barrage of kicks and punches. The seraph met his assault with a cold, terrifying grace. It didn't block, it redirected. Every one of Naruto's powerful blows was deflected with minimal effort, its movements calculated by a quantum computer that predicted his every move. It was like fighting a living, breathing equation for which he was always the incorrect answer. The seraph found an opening. It spun, its leg scything out in an impossibly fast arc Naruto couldn't dodge in time. The kick connected with his side, and he was thrown across the room, crashing through a pile of Orochi's golden treasures. He groaned, the cold from the blow seeping into his bones, making his muscles feel sluggish and heavy. He was losing. Naruto! Hiyori cried out, her fear for him overriding everything else. The seraph turned its blank face toward her. Associate. Non-essential. Obstruction. It raised its hand, a needle-thin blade of black, condensed energy forming at its fingertip. It was going to eliminate her. A primal, protective rage erupted in Naruto, a force more powerful than any jutsu. The thought of Hiyori being harmed, of her hard-won victory being stolen, of her dawn being snuffed out before it could even begin, it was unacceptable. Kurama. All of it. Finally. Let's show this machine what a real monster looks like. The golden chakra cloak around Naruto exploded. It expanded, solidified, taking on physical form. Ribs of pure energy formed a cage around him, followed by a head, limbs, and 9 lashing, colossal tails. The roof of Orochi's chamber, the floor above it, the very roof of the skull dome itself, shattered and burst upwards as the complete bijou avatar of the 9-tailed fox rose to its full, magnificent, terrifying height within the fortress. The giant, translucent golden fox, hundreds of feet tall, let out a roar that was not a sound, but a physical wave of pure, unadulterated life energy. It was the roar of a living deity, and it shook the entire island of Onigashima to its foundations. On the roof, Luffy and Kaido stopped fighting, staring at the impossible apparition that had just burst through the floor. Across the island, the battle between the rebels and the beast pirates ground to a halt as friend and foe alike stared up in mute, terrified awe at the golden demon fox that now dominated the skyline. The Seraph, standing at the foot of the colossal avatar, looked up. For the first time, its synthesized voice held a new inflection. A microscopic hint of what, in a living being, might be called surprise. Energy signature unquantifiable. Threat level designation, aberration. Trinity protocol recommendation. Before it could finish its analysis, the Bijou avatar's massive claw, bigger than a battleship, swiped down. The Seraph zipped out of the way, a black blur against the golden light, but the attack obliterated the entire wing of the castle, sending stone and treasure plummeting into the sea below. You wanted my power? Naruto's voice boomed from the avatar's head, echoing across the island. Then have it. The avatar's mouth opened, and it began to gather chakra, positive black and negative white, compressing it into a single, dense point of apocalyptic power. A tailed beast bomb. But the Seraph was already adapting. Energy absorption limit exceeded. Switching to kinetic reflection protocol. Its body shimmered. The matte black surface turning into a perfect, mirror-like chrome. It braced itself. The tailed beast bomb fired. A sphere of pure destruction, capable of leveling mountains, shot down towards the Seraph. The moment it hit, the Seraph's mirrored body flared with an impossible light. It didn't absorb the blast. It reflected it. A portion of the tailed beast bomb's power was sent careening back up at the Bijou avatar's face. The explosion was cataclysmic. The avatar's head was engulfed in the blast, forcing it to stagger back, its golden form flickering violently. Naruto grunted in pain inside the construct. This thing was a perfect counter. It could absorb his normal jutsu and reflect his ultimate one. Kit, it's a mirror. It can only reflect what we give it. Kurama yelled. So don't give it our power. Give it the world's. Naruto understood. He couldn't win with his own chakra. But he was still in sage mode. He opened the avatar's massive palm. Instead of forming a tailed beast bomb, he began to gather the natural energy from the air, the sea, the very stone of Onigashima. He poured a colossal amount of raw, untamed natural energy into a single point, mixing it with just enough of Kurama's chakra to give it shape. He was creating a tailed beast raisin shuriken, but one made almost entirely of the planet's own life force. The Seraph sensors went haywire. Foreign energy type detected. Unstable, chaotic, cannot be calculated, cannot be reflected. For the first time, the machine felt the electronic equivalent of fear. Naruto hurled the massive, screaming vortex of natural energy. It wasn't clean and controlled like his chakra. It was wild, chaotic, and alive. The Seraph tried to raise a shield. It tried to dodge. But the raisin shuriken was too vast, too fast. It struck, and it did not explode. It enveloped. The Seraph was caught in a hurricane of pure, untamed life force, a direct counter to its very existence as an anti-life machine. Its systems were overloaded, its energy-absorbing conduits force-fed a power they could not process. Its body began to crack, glowing with a white-hot light from within. With a final, silent scream of overloaded data, the Seraph detonated. The explosion was immense, but strangely contained, as the natural energy imploded, taking the Seraph and a chunk of the island with it, leaving a perfectly cauterized, smoking crater where it had stood. The battle was over. The Bijou avatar, its purpose served, dissolved into particles of golden light, revealing Naruto, back in his base form, his clothes torn, his body bruised and utterly drained. He collapsed to his knees, then fell forward. Hiyori rushed to him, catching him before he hit the ground. She held him, her heart pounding with a terror and relief so profound it left her breathless. He was alive. Naruto, she whispered, cradling his head in her lap. You won. He managed a weak, exhausted grin. Yeah, but I think I overdid it a little. The battle for Onigashima still raged, but their war, the secret war, was over. For now. High above the planet, on a starship cloaked in a perpetual shadow, a council of robed figures watched the Seraph's life signal flatline on a holographic display. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, one of the figures, seated in a central, throne-like chair, spoke. Its voice was ancient, layered, and cold as the void between galaxies. The anomaly has consumed a seraph. Another figure stirred. Designation must be elevated to prime aberration. Agreed, the central figure intoned. Conventional methods are insufficient. The timeline is now critically unstable. Authorize the Trinity Protocol. A wave of assent rippled through the council. Prune the timeline, the lead figure commanded, its voice an irrevocable decree. Whatever the cost. Chapter 8, The Admiral's Bride, the Shogun's Dawn. Weeks passed. The snows of a Wano winter began to melt, revealing a land that was, for the first time in a generation, breathing freely. The fall of two emperors on a single night was an event so world-shattering that the seas themselves seemed to hold their breath in its wake. Onigashima was a ruin, a monument to the end of an era. Kaido and Big Mom were gone, their reign of terror finally over, their story swallowed by the island's fiery heart. The aftermath was a flurry of organized reconstruction. The Straw Hat Pirates, after a feast of legendary proportions, had already departed, their laughter echoing on the winds as they chased the next horizon, leaving behind a liberated nation and a whispered promise to return. Wano was healing. Under the guidance of the newly proclaimed shogun, Kozuki Momonosuke, the land was being reborn. The factories were dismantled, the rivers were being cleansed, and the smile fruits were destroyed. Food from the capital's hoarded stores, supplemented by Naruto's seemingly endless supply scrolls, was distributed to the starved provinces. The laughter that now echoed in the villages of Kuri and the fields of Hakamai was real, earned, and unpoisoned by fear. The Fox Pirates were no longer just visitors. They were legends. Heroes etched into the new history of Wano. Jean, with his mastery of the waves, was overseeing the reconstruction of the ports, preparing the country to finally open its borders. Ilara, alongside Robin before her departure, had discovered a hidden library of Kozuki texts, and was now the shogun's most trusted advisor, helping to restore the nation's lost history and laws. Kage, the silent guardian, had become the unseen protector of the new shogun, his masked form a ghostly deterrent to any who might still harbor loyalty to the old regime. And Naruto Uzumaki, the nine-tailed admiral, was the pillar upon which this new Wano was built. His name was spoken with the same reverence as Odin's. The tale of the golden fox avatar that rose from the skull dome had already become a myth, a story parents told their children to explain the night the demons were vanquished. His presence was a guarantee of Wano's sovereignty, a deterrent more powerful than any fleet or army. He had recovered slowly. Draining the entirety of his and Kurama's chakra, then overloading himself with raw natural energy, had pushed his body to its absolute limit. Hiyori had rarely left his side during his recovery, her quiet, steadfast presence a more potent medicine than any a doctor could provide. Today, he was strong again. He stood on a cliff overlooking the flower capital, the wind gently rustling his hair. The sky was a brilliant, clear blue. Beside him, dressed in a simple but elegant kimono, was Hiyori. They weren't looking at the city, but at a newly erected, simple stone monument. The grave of Kozuki Odin. For a long time, they stood in comfortable silence, paying their respects to the man who had started it all. He would have liked you, Hiyori said softly, her voice carrying on the breeze. You have his spirit. That same foolish, reckless, unstoppable belief in others. Naruto smiled. Sounds like a good guy. He looked from the grave to her. Her face, no longer burdened by the 20-year weight of vengeance, had a softness to it he had never seen before. The sorrow was still there, a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. She was a picture of serene strength. "The country is safe now," he began, his tone gentle. "Momonosuke is the shogun. Your people are free. The deal is fulfilled." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You are free from your promise, Hiyori. The marriage contract, you don't need it anymore. You don't need me to legitimize your rule or to be your weapon." He was giving her an out. An honorable discharge from the audacious demand she had made in a moonlit shrine. He was setting her free. Hiyori turned to face him, her expression unreadable. She looked into his eyes, searching. "Is that what you think this was? A contract? A transaction of power for a title? Wasn't it?" Naruto asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "It began that way," she admitted. "It was a desperate gamble. I saw your power in Kuri, your defiance in the capital, and I saw a tool I could use to save my home. I offered the only thing of value I had left, my name, my hand, my future." She took a step closer, her gaze intense and unwavering. "But then, you asked me what kind of world I wanted to build. You tested my heart, not my treasury. You fought for my people as if they were your own. You stood between me and death without a moment's hesitation. You held my hand on the deck of that ship and promised me we would see the dawn together." Her voice grew softer, losing its regal tone and becoming something far more intimate, more vulnerable. "In that prison in Udon, when you appeared from nowhere to save me, I wasn't thinking of a political alliance. And when you collapsed in my arms after fighting that silver monster, I wasn't afraid of losing a weapon. I was afraid of losing you." She reached up and gently touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the faint whisker-like marks there. "My demand to be your bride is no longer a political necessity, Naruto Uzumaki. It is a personal desire. This country is rebuilding. It is my duty, my honor, to lead it into the new era. But I do not wish to do it alone." Her eyes, clear and brilliant as polished gems, held his. "I wish to build this new Wano, and whatever world comes next, with you by my side." Naruto stared at her, his breath caught in his throat. He had spent his entire life chasing acceptance, fighting for recognition, desperate to forge bonds to fill the void of the family he'd never had. He had fought to be seen. And here was this incredible woman, this princess, this warrior, this queen, and she saw him. All of him. The hero, the monster, the lonely boy. And she was choosing him. Freely. Without contract or condition. A wide, brilliant smile, brighter than any raisingan, spread across his face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. He reached up and covered her hand with his own, pressing it against his cheek. Hiyori, he didn't have the words. He had never been good with them. So he acted. He leaned in and gently, tenderly, kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of fiery passion or desperate relief. It was a kiss of quiet certainty. Of two journeys ending, and a new one beginning. It was the feeling of coming home. When they parted, they were both smiling. "I guess you're stuck with me then," he murmured. "I can think of no finer fate," she replied. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the urgent patter of footsteps. Elara approached, her face unusually grim. In her hands, she held a thick, leather-bound book and a series of complex diagrams. "Naruto, Hiyori-sama," she said, bowing quickly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is urgent." "What is it, Elara?" Naruto asked, his good mood instantly tempered by her serious tone. "The arbiters," she said, her voice low. "I've cross-referenced the data from the Seraph's wreckage with the Kozuki historical texts. It's worse than we thought." She opened the book to a marked page. The text was ancient, the illustrations faded. But the depiction was clear, robed, faceless figures descending from the heavens to pass judgment on the world below. "They are not just a secret branch of the world government," Elara explained, her finger tracing the text. "They are older than the government itself. An organization dedicated to maintaining what they call the predetermined path. They believe history is a fixed sequence of events, and their purpose is to prune any anomalies that might cause it to deviate. Individuals, ideas, even entire civilizations. She looked at Naruto, her eyes wide with a terrifying understanding. You, Naruto, are the greatest anomaly they have ever encountered. Your chakra, your very existence, is anathema to their philosophy of order. The seraph wasn't just a hunter. It was a diagnostic tool. And by defeating it, you have confirmed their worst fears. You've proven that you are a being capable of defying their path. What does that mean? Hiyori asked, her hand tightening on Naruto's. It means the hunter-killers and the seraph were just the beginning, Elara said grimly. The texts speak of a final sanction, reserved for threats that can alter the course of history itself. They call it the Trinity Protocol. They will no longer send assassins. They will send an armada. They will not just target you. They will target this entire island. To them, Wano is no longer a liberated nation. It is a nest. The home of a prime aberration, they are now sworn to eradicate at any cost. A heavy silence fell, the joyous peace of the new morning shattered by the promise of a celestial war. Naruto looked from Elara's grim face to Hiyori's, then up at the boundless blue sky. He had found a home, a family, a reason to plant his roots. And in doing so, he had painted a target on it for the silent, unseen gods of this world. But this time, he was not a lonely outcast. He looked at Hiyori, at the fierce, unwavering loyalty in her eyes. He thought of his crew, of the scabbards, of the thousands of people in the country below who now looked to him as their guardian. He was not alone. A grand ceremony was held a week later in the flower capital. It was a dual celebration. The coronation of Shogun Kozuki Momonosuke, and the wedding of his sister, Kozuki Hiyori, to the legendary hero of the revolution, the nine-tailed admiral, Naruto Uzumaki. The capital was a sea of joyous faces. Cherry blossoms rained down on the streets, but this time, the petals were real, the joy was shared. Naruto stood on a grand stage before the cheering crowds, Hiyori at his side. He wore a formal black Hiyori bearing the Uzumaki swirl on one side, and the Kozuki crest on the other. Hiyori was radiant in a stunning white shiromuku, a vision of regal grace. As Momonosuke gave his first address as shogun, pledging to lead Wano into an era of peace and prosperity, Naruto felt a subtle shift in the air, a faint, cold hum in the upper atmosphere that only his sage mode could detect. He looked up at the sky. Hiyori, sensing the sudden tension in him, followed his gaze. They couldn't see anything. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. But they both felt it. A promise of a coming storm. The silent, patient gathering of a war among the stars. Hiyori laced her fingers through his, her grip firm and resolute. He looked at her, his bride, his partner, and met her determined gaze with one of his own. The world might be sending its gods to destroy his new home. But he had faced gods before. And this time, he had a nation, a crew, and a queen at his back. He held her hand, ready for the future. The nine-tailed fox had finally found his home, and he would let no one, man or god, take it from him. The adventure was just beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.